All right, here we go. Welcome to the NBA Deeper Dive. Dave Loughran, Adam Scher, and as always, our sponsor, Super Draft. It's the future of DFS gaming, my friends. Experience Super Draft's exclusive new game mode multiplier. No more salary restrictions. Pure lineup freedom. It's bliss over there at Super Draft. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want. Build your very own dream team. Countless lineup possibilities so you can experience DFS the way that you want. You got contests for football, basketball, baseball, hockey, golf. You can enjoy DFS all year round. And here's how you get $20 in super cash with your first deposit of $100 or more. All you got to do is use the sign-up code, promo code AWESEMO, AWESEMO. Get your free $20 in super cash with your first deposit of $100 or more. Download in the App Store or play at superdraft.io. Superdraft, no limits, more winning. Look, maybe you're struggling at DraftKings, you're struggling at Fanduel, some of these other sites, and you're looking to make a change, try and mix it up for a little bit, get back on track. It's never a bad approach if you find yourself in a tough spot and not knowing what you're doing wrong, even if you think your process is right. Look, honestly, why not go check them out at Super Draft? Get your free $20 in super cash. Just use that promo code AWESEMO when you do. Sponsor of the Deeper Dive. What's happening, brother?
What's up, man? It's been a while. We haven't talked basketball since like 6 hours ago.
Yeah, we definitely haven't talked this slate.
Yeah. Well, no, it's good though. We got a lot of news between our show this morning and our show now, so we can do a little bit better job and have more certainties, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a lot of news that we already got, which is great. So we're going to break all of it down. We're going to, honestly, what's cool about this is we can take a very different approach as the one that we did earlier in the day. So this morning's show, still relevant, or still helpful, but tonight's show, far more relevant for all of the news that we've got coming in. So let's get it started. Happy to have everyone with us as always. And hopefully we get some big winners today. I know we had, was it yesterday that we had someone, we had one sub take down, or at least a viewer take down like 100K yesterday.
Yeah, we had a sub take down 100K yesterday.
100K. Yeah. $100,000 to a sub, which is really great stuff. We always love to see that exciting. Always love to see that exciting stuff. Brave Boston says, wish Josh was here to swap you both. You're never on those sides of each other. My OCD is killing me right now. So we're on different sides. Listen, I saw that too right now, and it drives me nuts as well, dude. Not a big deal, but when I saw us on two different sides, I almost lost my shit. There's something about it. Anyway, let's get into it. A lot to talk about. And we'll start with the New York Knicks and the Phoenix Suns. Pretty exciting game, really. There's a lot that I like about this, and it's the only 7:30 p.m. game. Now, fortunately, the 10:30 games, we got some news, but at the end of today's show, we're going to take about 5 minutes and kind of break down strategy for late game swap and with late breaking news, because I think it's more applicable on this slate than we've seen in a while. So, all of that, assuming all that news is still pending, we'll break down some strategy on the best ways to approach something like that if you're playing on this main slate. All right, 226 total. Knicks 3-point dogs at home. 111.5 implied for them. 114.5 for the Suns. Let's start with the New York Knicks at home here at Madison Square Garden. Elfrid Payton right now on DraftKings coming in with top 5 ownership. Adam at 5,500. And then the rest of this team, you're not getting a ton of ownership right now on the Knicks. You've got Elfrid Payton, and then you've got to find your way all the way down into around the 15 range to Julius Randle, who's also in a pretty appealing spot. Both sides of this game have a lot of intrigue. Let's start with the New York Knicks here against the Suns.
Yeah, I think two guys that really stand out to me from the Knicks. Well, one piece of news that we are still waiting on is Marcus Morris, who's questionable. We also have Reggie Bullock questionable, who got a midday downgrade. So potentially, if they're both out, you would get Kevin Knox most likely starting. If Morris is in, then you get a little bit of usage taken away from all the other starters. If Morris is out and Bullock's in, then you get a usage bump for the other starters. So that news does matter, but regardless, I think the two pieces that really stand out to me from the Knicks are Julius Randle and Elfrid Payton. Randle has been the usage leader on the team all year, but he's been really good since the coaching change. It's also coincided with Elfrid Payton stepping into the starting lineup, which I think makes sense because Payton is a better playmaker than Frank Ntilikina was when he was starting. Since the coaching change, 1.24 DraftKings points per minute for Julius Randle. He's playing 34 minutes in competitive games. Favorable matchup here against faster paced Phoenix team. So he looks pretty good. And then Elfrid Payton at, I think, a price tag on DraftKings specifically, you mentioned his ownership, but that price tag is just really, really cheap for someone who should play around 32 minutes, assuming a competitive game. He's coming off of a game against Milwaukee where he only played 19 minutes, but that was a blowout where he also happened to be ejected in the third quarter. So he played about 16 first half minutes. I think that it just looks like a really good price point. I have him at the same price point as Fultz. I have him a little bit ahead of Fultz on DraftKings.
So do I. I'm sure that doesn't surprise anyone. No, in all seriousness, though, like from a projection standpoint, I have him above Fultz as well. He is going to be a little bit more popular, but not that much, not significantly higher on than Fultz to the point where it just changes your strategy up entirely. So, yeah, Payton to me, I know Payton frustrates a lot of people, and rightfully so, but I mean, if you're going to get, let's say he's a exactly 1.00 DraftKings point per minute guy this season. And in competitive games, you talked about, was it Randle you mentioned getting to 34 in competitive games?
Yeah.
Yeah. Payton's getting 30 plus in competitive games, upwards of 32. I have him at 31 minutes, which I'm perfectly fine with. What do you have Payton at?
32.
32. Okay, so pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. 31 works too.
Yeah.
I actually like 31 a little bit better because it gets him a little bit closer to Fultz for me.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Look, against the Suns team that since the start of December, 25th in defensive rating. They're playing at the 8th fastest pace. I know the Knicks have made life miserable for us on many occasions, but believe it or not, one of the guys that hasn't done that too often is Elfrid Payton. It's generally speaking been guys like Mitchell Robinson and RJ Barrett and Marcus Morris who are still waiting on. But I do want to talk a little bit about RJ Barrett here because he's been one of the more enigmatic players in the league this season. He's young. He's a rookie. You're going to get these types of performances. The one thing I don't like is that the more minutes, the more time spent alongside Elfrid Payton, the less opportunity he has for really racking up any assists. So when you look at the last few games that he's had, Adam, he's played really well, but it's all because of scoring and not because and rebounding, which is also kind of tough to come by. So if you're playing Barrett, you are banking on him scoring. And the tough part here is it's not like his usage is really that high right now at all. He was getting to the line, knocked down, 70% of his shots against Miami. That makes it a little bit more difficult for me to come around to a guy like Barrett.
Yeah, same boat here. The salary is not really that cheap. And since the coaching change, he has a 22.2% usage rate. Since the start of the season, if you put Julius Randle and Elfrid Payton on the floor, Barrett's played 361 minutes, 21.2% usage rate. He's averaged 0.78 DraftKings points per minute. I have him in for 34 minutes, but it's still just not enough for him to really jump out to me at that price tag, especially where he is more expensive than Elfrid Payton.
Yeah, and he's played alongside Elfrid Payton in 441 minutes this year. What do you think his assist rate is?
Less than 10%.
Yeah, 7%.
Yeah.
That's tough for me to get to. The scoring, sure, but I don't know if I can rely on that. For me, it's Randle and it's Elfrid Payton. I guess we could spend a minute here on Mitchell Robinson though, just because
Bullock's out.
Reggie Bullock is out. Okay.
Yep.
We'll get to that in a second. But with Mitchell Robinson, everything is just very unpredictable. He might not get the minutes because he doesn't get the minutes. He might not get the minutes because he's in foul trouble. And he might get the minutes and do nothing with the minutes. But there's something that keeps pulling us back.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's been concerning, and you mentioned it, is that there have been games recently where he doesn't get a lot of minutes just because. It's normally like earlier in the season you could just point to it and say, okay, well, yeah, he picked up 5 fouls in 3 minutes. Yeah. So that's a little bit concerning, but still, I think that you can project 22 to 24 minutes for him. He obviously can play more than that if he's playing well. He can play less than that if he's not playing well or if he's in foul trouble. The thing for him that I always go back to is just that if you're trying to guess game by game how many minutes he plays, you're going to just be really bad at it. There's no way to do it. And so when his salary comes down, I like getting to him just because at any given game, he can go play 27 minutes. And he's not the kind of guy where you, with any sort of accuracy, can point to it and say like, oh yeah, this is the game.
Right. What do you think Bullock does for the rest of this team?
So I projected it with Morris in and Bullock out. And so I have, Morris at like 30 minutes. I have Kevin Knox at 20. I think if Morris is out as well, you would get Kevin Knox up in that 28 to 30 minute range. And then you would get more minutes for whatever garbage between Wayne Ellington and Damian Dotson.
Yeah. And I mean, when it comes to Kevin Knox, you're hoping that he can give you 0.85 fantasy points per minute.
I mean, the crazy thing is on DraftKings, he's more expensive than Michael Porter.
Right. Which is, just very easy decision to make there. Let's talk about Phoenix. We'll get to the Kelly Oubre being out news, but I want to start with the front court because you and I talked about it this morning. We also talked about it before we went live on today's show. One of the big things here is, what are we going to get from Baynes and Ayton, and are they going to play any minutes alongside each other? And something I came across, generally by position, I don't really focus too much on it, but the Suns and the Knicks are allowing the highest 3-point percentage to opposing centers this season. And, normally at the 5, you're not too worried about that. But Baynes has been a big time, long range shooter this year. He's attempted 118 3-pointers. So while the 3-pointers are only one aspect of this game, and he'd be playing some of those minutes at the 4, I do think, not just for that reason alone, but for New York's center rotation and their defense, that this could be a very good spot for Baynes in the event that he gets minutes alongside Ayton. But it appears to be trending in the opposite direction with Ayton getting far more minutes off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't over the last 3 games, we haven't gotten any time for Baynes and Ayton alongside each other. But earlier, in the year, they were playing a lot alongside each other. The last time they played the Knicks, which was earlier this month, they played a combined 67 or 68 minutes. The Knicks have a big front court. Like, you have Taj Gibson, Mitchell Robinson, Bobby Portis, and Julius Randle playing almost all the minutes at both the 4 and the 5. So you can go big against them. And with Kelly Oubre out, you're talking about around 38 minutes that are gone. Dario Saric has, I think, intentionally not been playing huge minutes. Like, I just don't think they are looking to run him into the ground after the injury he had a month or so ago. So if you assume that Saric is playing somewhere like 22 to 24 minutes, and that, Cam Johnson's playing like 26, and that you're not giving huge amounts of run to guys like Tyler Johnson or Javon Carter and going with Devin Booker at the 3, it only leaves you so many options, like with Frank Kaminsky out in the front court. So I think that the way I have it right now, and obviously we will get a little bit more on this when we get the starting lineup, because if they start Ayton next to Baynes, then obviously we know what they're doing. If they don't, then you're kind of just guessing and hoping that you still get some minutes alongside each other. But the way I have it right now is Ayton at 32 minutes, Baynes at 24. It makes both of them look like good options. I think that, there's obviously upside for both at those minutes projections, and there's a little bit of downside if, they were to not play alongside each other.
Yeah, I mean, Ayton at his price, first of all, I as of now, and like you pointed out, they haven't been playing minutes alongside each other recently. Could that change? It's possible. But I can't just assume that's going to be the case, because the last time they played, it's very difficult for me to make that assessment. So,
the thing, if Oubre were in, I would not be assuming they play alongside each other.
Right. I guess, and Kaminsky's out too.
Right.
I mean, does Monty Williams need to do that though?
So this is the thing, and I kind of laughed watching Alex's game plan show earlier because he was going through the Phoenix rotation and he did the same exact thing I did, where when you go position by position, you run out of minutes, and you have to basically decide between, is Cameron Johnson going to play like 36 minutes
alongside Mccall Bridges,
right?
Yeah.
Is Tyler Johnson going to play like 24 minutes, and Devin Booker's playing at the 3, and then so Bridges is playing the 4 with Saric, or are they going with Baines plus Ayton? Basically, you're in a situation where there's not like a precedent for it in any way. Like anything that you map out, you're looking at it going like, yeah, I really don't know that they're going to want to do this, but they are going to have to do one of 3 things. And
Oubre literally has not missed a game this season.
Right, exactly.
Which makes it even more difficult. So yeah, there isn't a precedent for it, which is good and bad. You know, on one side, it could definitely happen. On the other side, it's very possible that we keep seeing the same center rotation because Monty likes what he's been seeing.
Right.
And then you end up seeing Bridges alongside Cameron Johnson, which is a perfect segue. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
I'll say the other thing, the other kind of tiebreaker for me in trying to decide what route I want to go is, let's say like Baines and Ayton don't play minutes alongside each other. There's still some chance that you get like 22 minutes from Baines and that he produces like, you know, he's fined at $4,300 in 22 minutes. There's still a pretty decent chance you get 32 minutes from Ayton. Obviously, it wouldn't be at the same time that Baines is getting his, but if you set that rule not to have them together, I think that there's kind of just like a way to, even if you're wrong and they don't play alongside each other, there's still a way for one of those guys to end up being projected correctly.
Okay, fair enough. Jason says, Laffy, does Diallo get minutes? Not enough to make, even if he did, it wouldn't be enough to get any interest in him at all.
Right. And I thought about that too. But the thing with Diallo is what problem is he solving? Like, you're giving Diallo more minutes.
Exactly.
Like, it's not fixed. Why aren't you giving those minutes to Baines?
The only thing he'd be doing is if Baines is playing alongside Ayton, they'd have to play alongside each other enough for Diallo to get backup center minutes. And I don't think that happens.
So it would be Diallo taking minutes from like, it would be Diallo taking like Javon Carter's 6 minutes or part of Tyler Johnson's like 14.
So it's a good segue into the wing positions and power forward though, because if we do see Ayton and Baines exclusively play the 5, 48 minutes combined, no more, no less, then that means that Cameron Johnson and Mccall Bridges are both very likely to get a lot of minutes. Now, first of all, how many minutes does Dario Saric get? That's a good question. I don't know. That's what's so tough about this team right now. Does Saric fall into a 30-minute role? You know, does Bridges play 30 and Cam Johnson only get some backup minutes at the wing positions?
Yeah, it's possible. We haven't seen Saric top 23 minutes since December 20th. So I'm not really confident in that happening. I have him in for 22. But again, it's kind of, no matter what Phoenix does, there's going to be some part of it where you're looking to say like, oh, well, I didn't really think they were going to do that.
Yeah, I think so too. I guess we could say with some certainty that with Bridges already as the starter, he should get a decent amount of run.
Yeah, he started 3 games this year, none for Oubre, obviously, but he's played 26, 31, and 32 minutes.
Yeah, I have him at 30. What do you have Bridges at today?
I went 32.
You went 32. Okay, so I mean, he could definitely play even more than that. I'm not against the idea that it happens. Cameron Johnson, how many are you giving him?
I have him at 26 minutes.
All right, yeah, I gave Saric a few more minutes than you did, which is why I have Bridges and Johnson at 25. But I don't know. I would say when you're getting someone as cheap as Cameron Johnson and Bridges are both 0.77 fantasy point per minute guys this year on DraftKings. So now you're going to get Bridges playing alongside Devin Booker, which is even less appealing. How much Mccall Bridges do you see yourself getting here at 4,500 on DraftKings and over on Fanduel? He's coming. What is Bridges on Fanduel? Pull it up here. You could figure that out or talk while I figure this out.
I would guess that I end up coming in around the field. Like right now on DraftKings, he's about 24% projected ownership. That seems fine to me. Like he's not jumping out as a really exciting play because he is about a 0.75 fantasy point per minute guy. But at the same time, it is a good matchup against the Knicks. His team has one of the highest totals on the slate. He's cheap. On DraftKings, he has guard and forward eligibility, so he's really easy to get into lineups. And I expect 30 plus minutes. So I think he's a good play. It's just there are several value plays on this slate that we'll talk about where they're good point per dollar options, but they're not the type of value where I'm like really excited to roster them because I think they score 35 points or something.
What about Booker and Rubio here in the backcourt?
I think that Rubio looks a little bit better than Booker at their DraftKings salaries. 7,200 for Rubio, 9K for Booker. I have Booker in for 38 minutes. I think that maybe he picks up an extra minute or two with Oubre out. He doesn't really, if you try and put numbers together with like Oubre off the floor and then with him being staggered with Rubio, you don't really get much of a bump in rates for Booker beyond what you would normally get, right around 30% usage, 30% assist percentage. So he looks like a good option, but it's pretty site dependent. If you can get him cheaper somewhere else, then he'll obviously look better there. I think that around 34 minutes from Rubio at 7,200 against the Knicks is appealing. The problem you run into is that there is a lot of guard value and also guys around Rubio in price like D'Angelo Russell and Donovan Mitchell that we'll get to that project a little bit better for me. So I wouldn't say either one's a priority.
Okay. Let's talk about Milwaukee and Boston, unless there's anything else. I know we spent a lot of time on that game, but it's a really important game for this slate. Yeah,
no, I think it's one of the most important parts.
Milwaukee and Boston. I don't know if we could say the same about this game. 226.5 total, though. It is, believe it or not, the highest on this slate. That is because Milwaukee plays at the fastest pace in the league, but they're 10.5 point favorites. 118.5 implied total for the Bucks. 108 for the Celtics. Jason Tatum is not on the injury report. So we can expect Jason Tatum to be active here. That's good news. But outside of that, when it comes to Jaylen Brown, he's still questionable. So we're still waiting on that news. I don't know what to make of it yet. I have him in, but mind you, we got Jason Tatum off the injury report and Jaylen Brown is still questionable.
Yeah. So if Brown and Tatum were both in, I don't think there's anything that really stands out to me from Boston. I think Jaylen Brown's $6,500 salary on DraftKings is reasonable, but nothing really looks all that appealing if you have that entire group healthy. It's obviously a tough matchup against the Bucks. Boston has the one of the lowest team totals on the slate, and it's just always really tough to figure out exactly where their production comes from. And none of these guys are really underpriced. If Jaylen sits, I think that it's obviously a bump for all of those guys. I would expect that Semi slides into the starting lineup if Brown sits. He's kind of been one of Boston's like Giannis stoppers over the last couple of years. So that's not someone that obviously you'd be looking at for DFS. But what I would expect to happen is that over the last couple of games, you've been seeing to some extent Jaylen Brown and Kemba Walker's minutes be staggered. I think you would go back to Jason Tatum and Kemba having their minutes staggered, which would be a big bump for both of them. In about 500 minutes without Brown on the floor this year, Tatum has a 33.5% usage rate. Kemba in 300 minutes is at 30.2%. And in part, that's because of staggered minutes. So I think that it would be a pretty sizable bump for both of those guys.
We're now getting word that Morris and Ntilikina are game time decisions. So we might not get that news for a little bit. Milwaukee, and if we do, we'll surely let you know. With the Bucks here, Giannis Antetokounmpo is getting 18% ownership on DraftKings right now, but he's getting 34% on DraftKings 34% on Fanduel and Yahoo, 18% on DraftKings. So the price there, and I don't know, I guess it would be the price that's driving the ownership down a little bit, but I mean, he's getting half as much ownership on DraftKings than he is on Fanduel and Yahoo right now. Yeah,
I think it's probably his price combined with the pricing on guys like Kawhi Leonard, Nikola Vukovich, and then just kind of those cheaper guard options too. So
yeah, because Kawhi is basically has the same projected ownership on DraftKings.
Right. And I have Giannis as the highest scorer on the slate. Obviously, I don't think that's a hot take at all. the issue with him is always, how many minutes is he going to get? Because not only does Milwaukee blow out so many teams, but Mike Budenholzer does a really good job of limiting Giannis's minutes within those games too. So he ends up getting, like he did last time, like 21, 22 minutes in some of these games. But for the season, he's averaged
fantasy points.
Yeah, that was insane. For the season, he's averaged around 31 minutes per game. This game obviously has a little bit better chance of staying close, but they are still 10-point home favorites with Boston on a back-to-back. So certainly not, promising anything there. But if his ownership does stay that low, I think I probably end up getting a little bit more than him. I didn't have a chance to run a full crunch before the show, but I did just kind of crunch out some of my top projected lineups, and I was getting Giannis in more than 18% of those. So if his ownership does stay that low, I would expect that once I start factoring in ownership, I get more.
So the Celtics have done a really good job of preventing 3-point shooting this year. Low volume, low percentage of 3-point shots allowed. And just the field goal percentage from beyond the arc has been very low. It concerns me a little bit about Brook Lopez, knowing that that's where his bread is buttered in most cases. But really, I mean, his shot volume has been pretty low. He's like, I don't even want to say quiet, because if you know basketball, he's actually a fantastic shot blocker. Great shot blocker. So he can give you some of those peripheral stats. He's averaging 2.5 blocks per game in 26 minutes. So really solid there, almost a steal, only 5 rebounds and 10 points though. But he's just shy of a fantasy point per minute, shy of a DraftKings point per minute. What are your thoughts on Brook Lopez here? 4,800, same price on DraftKings as Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah, I have him projected basically the same as Mitchell Robinson, similarly to Baines also. So it's kind of, whenever that happens, it comes down to ownership. Like if I'm getting to that price point, I just start to prioritize the lowest owned out of the group. I don't love the spot for Lopez, obviously, but he's productive enough and cheap enough where I don't mind getting him into some tournament lineups, but I don't think I'll have a lot.
Okay.
There is a tweet from one of the Knicks beat writers that says Marcus Morris and Frank Ntilikina are still getting checked by medical staff. Sounds like they will be available barring a late problem.
Okay, there you have it. We don't know yet, but yeah, that's at least a sign in one direction. Anything else for the Bucks?
No. Yeah. So Middleton, Bledsoe are kind of filler for me. Neither one's a priority at their respective positions, but you do have a Milwaukee team with a 118 team total. You do have reasonable pricing on Bledsoe and Middleton. So they're guys that I can use to fill out lineups, especially where I don't have Giannis.
Okay. Let's keep it moving here. New Orleans and Utah. Before we do, by the way, I want to let you know, if you watch the shows, the promo code for 50% off, half off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum all access subscription is Deeper Dive. One word. That's it. Ownership projections, player projections, all of our tools, all of them developed and used every day by our man, top player in the world, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. There's a Fantasy Cruncher add-on as well. I would definitely suggest you check that out, especially if you're playing multiple lineups every night. There's the lineup builder for anyone, single enter, 3 max contest. It's perfect for that. All of our premium articles and so much more. And when you do sign up using the promo code Deeper Dive at checkout, when you go to awesemo.com/join, be sure to head over to our Slack chat, jump in, and say what's up. The good crowd of people over there talking DFS around the clock. So use that promo code Deeper Dive. One word, it'll get you 50% off your first week, so you can get started and see if you like it or not. Pretty sure you'll want to stick around, but this way, less pressure. New Orleans, Utah. So the Pelicans right now, 5-point dogs. Got some injuries to this team, 225.5 total, 115.3 implied for the Jazz, 110.3 for the New Orleans Pelicans. When you're looking at injuries here, JJ Redick is questionable, and Drew Holiday was ruled out already. So no Drew Holiday, no Kenrich Williams. Favors said he's going to play. So really the big ones here we're waiting on is JJ Redick. That's about it. We already know that Holiday's out. Let's start with the Pels here against Utah and get to some of these crazy price points, because I don't know how you couldn't absolutely love someone like Mark Ingram at $8,400.
Brandon's even better.
Brandon, I know. Dude, it takes me a while, this, to make the transition from football to, What did I say? I said one earlier today that was also a football.
Yeah, I was trying to think of what it was, but I can't remember. It wasn't a name. It was like a football term.
That's a backfield.
Yeah, that's what it
was. The Knicks backfield. You're used to it by now. Brandon Ingram, though, is going to get ownership. Very reasonable, though. Like, he should. Meanwhile, and I want to break this down by site. I think it's very important to do so. Meanwhile, Lonzo Ball on DraftKings is 7,900. He's getting some ownership, around 11%, but not nearly as much as he is on Fanduel, where he's 6,500. That's a huge disparity in pricing. And then on Fanduel, you have Brandon Ingram, who is a lot more expensive. So I think a lot of it is site specific against a Utah team that isn't the same they were defensively last year, but still a good defensive team.
Yeah. Okay, never mind. I think I just typed something wrong.
What were you asking?
Was Lonzo ruled out?
When?
Okay, never mind. I had a typo in my spreadsheet, and I thought maybe I missed something. Okay, anyway.
I didn't see anything on Lonzo being out, unless it literally just happened.
Okay, yeah. So anyway, I think the pricing on FanDuel on the Pels is insane. Yeah, I don't see anything on it either. So it must just been a typo. So I think that Lonzo stands out as one of the top point guard options there. He's playing, 36, 37 minutes in competitive games. It's not a good matchup, but you're just playing so many minutes at a really, really cheap price tag there. Whereas at 7,900 on DraftKings, I'm not particularly interested. Like, I just have more interest in so many other guards on the slate. I think that on FanDuel, it's really between him and Ricky Rubio at the same price point for the top point guard option for me.
All right. Yeah, FanDuel is one of the top options. I think on Yahoo, Lonzo Ball is fine. I wouldn't consider him a top option. I'd put him right in the middle there, more similar to DraftKings. But on FanDuel, yeah, it's really hard to not like him. Brandon Ingram, meanwhile, $36 on Yahoo is also very appealing. Is there anything for the rest of New Orleans, assuming JJ Redick plays, that interests you?
Yeah, so I mean, you mentioned Ingram, but I think he looks really good on both or on all sites as well. Josh Hart's another one on FanDuel specifically that at 4,100, if you're going to get 32, 33 minutes, looks really good. And Favors at 5,400 on FanDuel looks really good. So I would say that all of the starters, even Redick, if he starts on FanDuel, look like good plays. On DraftKings, it's Brandon Ingram and then moving on pretty much.
Steve Finkelstein with another super chat. Appreciate you, man. He said, usually Lavi's on the left side of the screen and Adam is on the right. Thumbs up, fellas. I know this is bothering people, man. I don't know. I feel like you must have a little bit of OCD in you, know? You seem like the type of person that
yeah, for sure.
Not an insult at all, but just I've known you for a few years now. It seems like we're pretty similar and stuff. Certain things have to be a specific way.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely I don't have the YouTube stream open, so I don't see it, but I definitely would notice it if I was watching.
And thanks for that, Steve. And thanks to everyone that's already hit the thumbs up button. Appreciate you supporting us. That's the easiest way to do so. Like that video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. So here's an interesting point about this matchup. I think I mentioned it to you this morning, but it bears repeating. The New Orleans Pelicans really struggle in transition defense, right? Like, that's one area they've been very bad this season. Utah is a team that hardly ever plays in transition. Like, they have one of the lowest transition frequencies in the league, down there with the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's been an area where they actually haven't produced well either. Only 1.07 fantasy or points per possession. Listen, that doesn't mean that I'm like scrapping this game at all. But teams that run a lot have been more inclined to have better performances against the Pelicans because the Pels half-court defense isn't as bad. Now, Drew Holiday being out is not going to help their case at all, and I think this is still a wonderful matchup for the Utah Jazz. So please don't take any of this as me saying I don't like it. It's just a different type of matchup than we generally like against the Pels. But Donovan Mitchell's price point is outrageous on FanDuel. DraftKings, Yahoo, specifically FanDuel and Yahoo, but still on DraftKings. We need to start there. Yeah,
it's on FanDuel. It's kind of, we talked about it this morning. I know Alex mentioned it too. it's just such a safe price point where, and it's not like we're talking about a player that doesn't have upside. Mitchell, maybe hasn't been quite as good as we were hoping with Conley out, but he's still been greater than a 1 fantasy point per minute player. He still plays 34 to 36 minutes. He's still in a favorable matchup against the Pels. I have no idea how he's 6,600 or what possible argument you're going to make to get away from it. So really stands out there. It's more of a decision point on DraftKings just because of who's around him. You obviously have more roster flexibility there, so you're comparing across positions. And while I think 7,400 is a good salary for Mitchell, and I will have him at that price, he's basically the same price point as guys like Rubio and D'Angelo Russell, who I think are also really good plays. So you at least have some pivots there, whereas on FanDuel, it's kind of just play him and move on, I think.
We got Conscious Machine, 2,000 likes, and you two do a show with no hats. I'll do it for 1,000. We'll both go no hats.
I don't know, man. I've done a show with no clothes. I don't know if I can do no hats though.
Should we? What? No shirt?
Oh no. I'll do no hat, no problem.
There was a time where Adam actually did a show with no clothes on. We still don't know if he actually had pants on or not, but you lived up to that bet for sure. That was phenomenal. What was that over? Do you remember? It was a bet we made. Right?
It was a bet with Manny about Cole Hamels. I think I said Hamels would suck, and Manny said he'd be good, and Hamels threw like 7 shutout innings with like 12 strikeouts or something.
Easily his best performance of the season. I know. That's incredible. Oh, man. I remember that. And you lived up to it. But you know what? It wouldn't matter now because, like, only your head is on the screen.
Right. Yeah. Back then, it was a lot more.
All right. Outside of Mitchell, how are we approaching the Jazz today?
I think that Bojan Bogdanovic really stands out to me on DraftKings. He has only 6K over there, and he has, since the Jazz got Jordan Clarkson, he has a 29% usage rate. Since Conley's injury, he's around 28%. He's very scoring dependent, so you're going to have up and down performances, but he should play around 33 minutes, and he's going to shoot a lot. His ownership is very reasonable. Is reasonable as well. 17.5% on DraftKings puts him between 10th and 15th highest owned, which I think is fine. So he actually stands out to me the most behind or other than Mitchell. Gobert is priced up on DraftKings where he projects pretty well for me, but I would rather get to Jokic, and Vooch is a little bit cheaper, so it makes it tough to get to Gobert. On FanDuel, Gobert is 9,200, which is the same price as DraftKings. Still tough for me to get to him there because he's only 200 cheaper than Jokic. He's a lot more expensive than Ayton. So I think that he's just – I think he has a good game. I just think he's a little bit more expensive than I would like.
Yeah, I don't know if I get there either. I think Mitchell is, obviously the top option. We talked about Jordan Clarkson on FanDuel at 4,300 can get kind of interesting only because he is getting minutes. He does have a 25% usage rate since he's returned or since he's joined the Utah Jazz. On DraftKings, I don't have much interest in that, but I do think he's certainly playable on FanDuel, and $13 on Yahoo also makes him pretty viable. Where would you rank somebody like Bojan Bogdanovic in context of the slate at the forward position?
On DraftKings, I think I'll have a lot of him in those lineups that I crunched out before the show just to get an idea of how my roster construction was going. He popped into like 70%, which I'm not going to have 70% Bogdanovic, I wouldn't think. But just saying that he's looking like a really useful option in terms of optimal builds for me over there. On FanDuel, wouldn't have as much just because you have so many underpriced guys. Like looking at small forward, I have Giannis, Ingram, Barton, all a little bit ahead of Bogdanovic. Okay. And Marcus Morris is actually even less expensive.
Yeah, he is. 2 games to go. Clippers, Orlando. So this is one we were waiting on news for. We got some. We're still waiting on others. DJ Augustine, Michael Carter-Williams, for whatever that's worth, are both out. Evan Fournier is still questionable. Somebody tweeted me today like, hey, you're very emotional when you talk about Markelle Fultz, but otherwise great content. Listen, you're right. I am. But if you followed that all the way through, I said, if Evan Fournier doesn't play, I'm likely going to have a good amount of Markelle Fultz. And even with DJ Augustine out, I still have interest in Markelle Fultz. So always try and follow me through to the end of my or to my conclusion, because I might talk a lot of shit, but generally I come in at a rational, I have a reasonable conclusion at the end of many of my tirades. Anyone that's been watching long enough knows that I'm nuts, but usually I come in at a decent point. So look, we'll start with Orlando. Augustine's out. We're still waiting on Fournier, and Fultz coming off his second career triple-double. Man, let me tell you why I hate this guy. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you. We already know why I hate him. But in all seriousness, $5,500 on DraftKings. Augustine's out. If Fournier's out, things change a lot, but it is a 10:30 lock. So there's a lot that we would love to know right now that we don't. And I think Fournier ends up being a game time decision.
Yeah, it is nice at least that we know that Augustine's out, Carter Williams is out. I think that the impact that has is that we at least know that you're getting solid minutes for Ross and for Fultz. With Augustine out, we talked about it this morning, the closing lineup for Orlando in competitive games is going to be Fultz and then one of Augustine, Ross, Fournier, Gordon, Vooch, in any normal circumstance. With Augustine being out, that becomes Ross. So it does solidify Ross's minutes. It solidifies Fultz's minutes. If Fournier is out, it's not so much a minutes thing as it becomes a usage thing and a playmaking thing for Markelle Fultz. So if you assume Fournier in, I think that Fultz and Ross on DraftKings both look like secondary options because it is a tough matchup. It's the lowest team total on the slate. And even though they don't have another point guard on the roster, Fultz still only played 33 minutes last night despite playing out of his mind. Makes me think that he's not going out there and giving us like 37, 38 minutes anytime soon. So you're still talking about low 30s in minutes from Markelle Fultz in a really tough spot. So if Fournier is in, he's okay, but he's not a priority for me. If Fournier is out, you get the usage rate jumping from like 21.5% up to about 25%. The assist percentage climbs as well. So he starts to be a lot closer to Alfred Payton in terms of how I feel about guys at that price point. Terrence Ross should get around 30 minutes pretty much regardless. The usage will go up if Fournier is out as well. He looks like a much better option on FanDuel where he is 4,600 compared to 5,300 on DraftKings.
Something really strange happened with Fultz a week ago on the 8th against Washington. I think I'd pointed it out to you before. He played 31 minutes in that game and sat most of the fourth quarter because of the blowout. So I don't know. I took a couple approaches to this. I thought maybe Steve Clifford saw that they were crushing them and he wanted to throttle them and keep his starters on the floor so he could just take him out, and that was the plan. Or if this game got competitive, would he actually have put Fultz back in for another 5 minutes and played him 36, 37 minutes? Right. That's the only game where I've seen it even plausible that Fultz could have played more than the 32 he's seemingly been seeing the most of.
Right. And since then, we've had 3 straight competitive games where he's played 31, 31, and 33.
Right. That's what I mean. So I can't comfortably put him any higher than that, but that was one odd game.
So what I'll point out about that one, because I just pulled it up in a popcorn machine, he basically played his normal minutes. He just played them at a different time.
That's what I mean. Was Clifford trying to throttle Washington and just put him to sleep?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah. So my takeaway there was that there was. So you're saying if that hadn't worked and the game had stayed close, was he going to just play?
Correct.
40 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. In for the last 5 minutes to close the game out after playing 31. I don't know, but I feel like that was a unique set of circumstances. But I'm with you. I'm giving it. What are you giving? I have 31 right now.
I have him at 33.
Oh, you do have him at
32.
32. Okay, maybe that's more reasonable. I don't know. What, 31, 31, 31, 33. I don't know. 32, 30, whatever, 31 or 32. It's all pretty similar. So between him and Elfrid Payton, if Fournier plays, do you prefer Payton?
Yeah. Marcus Morris available, Ntilikina available. And I prefer Payton if Fournier plays.
Jaylen Brown is out as well.
Great.
So we touched on that. Do we need to circle back on anything there? I think we hit it, but
yeah, I think we hit it because as far as minutes go, it should mostly be just filler for Boston. You should get a usage bump for Kemba, Tatum, and Hayward.
Another 21 minutes or so for Brad Wanamaker.
Probably around there, yeah. I expect, and obviously I haven't seen a starting lineup, but I'm expecting Semi to start.
Okay. So come full circle here with Orlando. Fournier in, what are you doing? Fournier out, what are you doing?
Fournier in, he's kind of a mediocre option here. I do think, and Alex mentioned it, I know earlier, it's a good idea to, on late swap sites, crunch with him in because you have plenty of ways that you can, swap. You can swap down. If it's at a guard position, you can swap down the Fultz. If it's at a forward position, you swap down to Gordon. It's really easy to do. Non-late swap, obviously, it's a whole other issue, but he's favorably priced on FanDuel, but so is everyone. So I wouldn't say a priority on either side. It is still a really unappealing matchup against the Clippers. But if he's out, then you get priorities in Markelle Fultz, in Terrence Ross, especially on FanDuel, and you get a usage bump for Vooch. Matthew
DeRoy asks, Smart or Fultz?
Fultz.
I'm still on Fultz there. Marcus Smart's just not a reliable producer. It's a difficult matchup. Sure, it's a pace-up spot, but if I have Fultz, Smart, and Payton in that range, let's say Fournier plays, I'm going Payton, Fultz, Smart. If Fournier's out, I'm going Fultz, Payton, and Smart, but Fultz and Payton are still pretty close.
Yeah, Smart becomes appealing to me when he's getting more minutes at point, not when he's getting more minutes pretending he can shoot threes.
As a matter of fact, when he's not getting the minutes at point, you're praying that he's giving you stocks.
Right. Or having like one of those games that he has every year where he makes like 7 threes and it just pisses you off to no end when you don't have him.
He did it against the Sixers. He shot 5 for 7 from 3. And I just thought it was so funny because the broadcasters are like, yeah, Markelle Fultz is not a 3-point, not a guy that consistently hits threes. He's like 30% from 3, 33%. That could be worse.
Even when you're trying to make fun of Marcus Smart, you make fun of Markelle Fultz.
Did I say Fultz?
Yeah.
I get ripped apart for that one. Well, come on. Markelle, Marcus,
yeah, sure.
Smart, Fultz, they're both
same number of letters in the last name.
Both 5. That's exactly where I was going with it. So I think I'll give myself a pass there. The Clippers, we mentioned that Kawhi Leonard and Giannis on DraftKings are both basically getting the same projected ownership. I will refresh, see if we got ourselves an update here. We did. We got an update like 40 minutes ago. And Giannis is about 1% higher than Kawhi Leonard right now. You can find the ownership projections we use at awesemo.com, by the way. So let's kick it off with Kawhi Leonard. Everybody knows, well, if they don't know, Paul George is ruled out of this one, been out for a few games now. And I know you got the numbers pulled up, so I'll turn it over to you. Kawhi Leonard's rates with Paul George off the court this season are pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, 37% usage rate, 26.5% assist percentage without George. And in competitive games, Kawhi's been playing huge minutes. And the thing about this offense right now is that if the game's not competitive, there's a really good chance that it was Kawhi because the starting lineup features Beverly, Harkless, Shamet, and Zubats. None of those guys are scoring enough to blow a team out, most likely. So it's Kawhi really one way or the other. So he looks, I think, like a really good option. The only thing that kind of sucks is that Orlando does play at a slow pace. They are a good defensive team, and they do have good individual defenders, namely Aaron Gordon, who was on LeBron last night and did a really good job, especially in the first half, of basically just not letting him shoot and making him a basically pass first point guard. So there are concerns there, but still a pretty decent total for the Clippers. It's still a guy who the entire offense runs through. He just does everything well offensively. So I really like Kawhi a lot.
$70 million man. That must be nice. Says Kawhi way better than the Greek Freak tonight, Adam.
I don't know about way better. I think that they're pretty comparable when you factor in price. Like Kawhi is around the 1.55 fantasy point per minute guy without George. Giannis is like a 1.8 plus point per minute guy, no matter who's on the floor. the medium minute projection is a couple minutes higher for Kawhi. They both have plenty of blowout risk. I think they're actually pretty similar.
Okay. This is solid. Blade Hershey, I would hit us up, dude. I'd love to have you as a contributor at Awesemo. He says, winning lineup tonight: George Hill, Landry Shamet, Kevin Knox, Bobby Portis, Taj Gibson, Jordan Poole, Mo Harkless, and Jeremy Grant. Yeah, I mean, you would be a phenomenal addition to the crew.
That is definitely a unique lineup that nobody will have. I'd play in everything.
Very contrarian. What outside of Kawhi Leonard, I don't know. Forgive me for not being high on. Somebody called him Laundry Shamet. I don't know if that was an autocorrect in chat, or they thought that's really his name, or they were just doing it to be funny. But it gave me a laugh. Not somebody that I really have much interest in at all. He is a terrible per minute guy. And Orlando really isn't the greatest matchup. They don't play at an elevated pace. There's nothing that makes him stand out here. I mean, I think it's Lou Williams that you could get to, a pretty interesting play, sub 7K on DraftKings, maybe a little Montrezl Harrell, but it's a lot of Kawhi Leonard and some Lou Williams for me. Close out the Clippers for us.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Lou is okay. I don't like him nearly as much as I like Kawhi. I don't like him as much as some of the other guards around him. I will point out Zubats as a contrarian tournament option. We have him at 3.5% on DraftKings. He played 24 minutes last game against a bigger Cleveland front court. Now you have Nikola Vukovich playing like 33, 34 minutes. I don't think it's unreasonable to think that you get maybe 22 to 24 minutes from Zubats instead of like 16 to 18, which obviously has a negative impact on Harrell. But Zubats produces when he's on the floor. It's totally a minutes issue for him. And even though the price tag has come up, he's in that price range with Mitchell Robinson and Brook Lopez and those guys. If he's going to get no ownership, I think that he's a somewhat interesting tournament play.
I want to, before we get to the last game, Keegster says, or Keegister, I don't know. If Fournier is in, would you consider pivoting to him off of Fultz on Yahoo? So basically he's saying, I'm going to throw Fultz in there at $19 and then possibly pivot to a $20 Fournier if he ends up playing.
Yeah, assuming you can do it. I have Fournier projected a little bit higher than Fultz. And when you consider that the ownership, because he's a game time decision, is going to be lower than Fultz's, I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem whatsoever. Okay, want to close it out here?
Yep.
Okay, first of all, we got some free content on the site today, awesemo.com. If you're not ready to use that sign-up code Deeper Dive at checkout at awesemo.com/join, get 50% off your first week. We got some free content that you can check out. The NHL projections and the NBA player projections are both free today at awesemo.com. They are free, so you can head over there after the show and go ahead and check them out. Excuse me. And then another thing that I wanted to mention, because we still got a little bit of time here, is we've got – so – MMA UFC 246 is the promo code to get $1 Awesemo Plus weekly MMA pass. Okay. If you use the sign up code UFC 246, you get Awesemo Plus weekly MMA pass for only $1. It's a cool promo we're doing right now. Any of you looking to get into that UFC or that MMA action, do that. $1 Awesemo Plus weekly MMA pass. Use the promo code UFC 260. 246, which is Conor McGregor against the Cowboy. Includes Awesemo's fighter projections and ownership projections for MMA DraftKings. Use the promo code UFC 246 at checkout and give that MMA DFS a shot today. It's good through January 18th. All right, man, let's do it.
JJ Redick out.
Oh, he is out. Okay.
Yeah, Redick's out. Okafor's out.
There you have it. Oh, okay, that's interesting. So Ingram's probable. By the way, I meant to mention this, and I totally forgot. Did you see Brandon Ingram said that he was a game time decision today?
No, I saw that he said that he felt great.
Yeah, me too. And then I saw something where he said he was a game time decision.
It's interesting and doesn't make me feel very good.
No, he's probable though, so I don't want to scare anybody. But yeah, that is.
Yeah, that's really weird wording for a player.
I thought so too, unless he was like being facetious.
Right.
I really don't know. Anyway, Golden State Warriors, Minnesota Timberwolves apparently are very much pursuing D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, they just traded Jeff Teague back to the Hawks.
I know. That's something. There's some delusional Timberwolves fans out there. I saw one. Can't wait for Wiggins to average 11 assists per game at the point. Keep dreaming, big fella. Anyway, go ahead.
So starting with the Golden State side, I think that D'Angelo Russell looks like the top option for me, especially at only 7,500 on DraftKings. You've been getting huge minutes from him the last couple of games or since coming back. He's played like 34 minutes even in non-competitive games. I am a little bit concerned about his playing time in this one. I cut a couple of minutes off. I have him at 32 minutes. And the reason for that is that you have Damian Lee back. He's under contract. He's starting. So that's another guy in the backcourt to take some minutes. And then you also have Cauley Stein back under contract, which obviously it's not the same position as Russell, but it can still have a trickle-down effect depending on how Steve Kerr runs these minutes. For most of the season, we've been seeing 32, 33 minutes from Russell. So again, it doesn't have a big impact. I still think he's a good play. It's just I don't want to get too carried away with his minutes projection now that the Warriors are back to having a million bodies on their roster to use. Still without Curry on the floor, though. And alongside Draymond, 32.7% usage, about a 34% assist percentage. And while Denver does play at a really slow pace, they have really struggled defensively this year. So I think that Russell is still underpriced.
Okay. So do I. I really like Russell today. I think we'd stick with the same analysis earlier that he's the one, I guess you could say priority. He's clearly the top play for the Warriors.
Yep, I agree.
Okay. And with Denver, do you want to hit on anything else for the Warriors?
Just secondary guys with Damian Lee at 5K on DraftKings is a decent price there. But overall, I'm not that interested in Golden State because of how many healthy bodies they have now and it being a slow paced game against Denver.
All right, let's do the Nuggets here. This is big, and we can mix our strategy into this depending on what we expect to have. Well, really, the only thing right now is Fournier. So we don't really need to get into that much. By the way, stick around after the show. Fast Eddie Fear coming up with Chris Baggs taking you up to lock on Live Before Lock. But with Denver, Millsap, Gary Harris, and Jamal Murray out. The floor is yours, man. This is a very big situation today. Michael Porter, Morris, and a whole lot more to get into. Nikola Vukovich as well, with nobody else on the floor. Talk about his rates with these guys off.
Yeah, so as far as Jokic, I think he stands out as a top option for me. He's played, since last year, he's played 531 minutes without Millsap or Murray on the floor. Harris doesn't change a whole lot in terms of production, but 1.48 DraftKings points per minute, 32% usage rate, about a 35% assist percentage. So Jokic looks like a really good option for me here against Golden State. Monte Morris is really, really interesting to me because he's a good point per dollar option. He's also getting a ton of ownership. One thing that stands out is that he's played 511 minutes alongside Jokic without Millsap or Murray since last year. He's only averaged 0.75 DraftKings points per minute. He has a 15.2% usage rate, 18% assist percentage. The assist percentage is lower than both Jokic and Barton, which I think is concerning. He averaged 34 minutes per start in 6 starts last year. Yesterday in the second half, he would have played about 20, or he would have played about 13 or 14 minutes, but you had PJ Dozier get really hot off the bench. So I'm projecting 30 plus minutes for Morris. It's just that he's not the minimum salary on DraftKings. And so if he's going to get tons of ownership, I don't mind pivoting to some other guys since he doesn't project as a great per minute option for me. He's much more favorably priced on Yahoo and Fanduel. The issue you run into on Fanduel is that the opportunity cost at point guard is pretty high. So I think Yahoo's the best site to roster him on. And then Fanduel and DraftKings, he's a good play. It's just that I think the field may be getting he probably shouldn't be the highest owned guy on the slate, I don't think. Michael Porter, on the other hand, I think is just the minutes should be there. He played really well last night. He played 28 minutes. He was subbing in for Will Barton, who was then subbing in with the second unit. So that looked good for Porter. Even if you cut him down to like 24 minutes, it's still really, really difficult for me to get away from him at close to minimum salary across the industry. Will Barton gets a bump without all of these guys. Since last year, he's averaged 0.94 DraftKings points per minute, 16.7% assist percentage, 23.5% usage rate alongside Jokic, but also some of his minutes will be without Jokic on the floor. So those rates go up even more.
Okay, so top options from the Nuggets.
Jokic, Porter, Morris, Barton for me.
Okay.
And then also someone asked in chat about PJ Dozier's per minute rates. It's obviously really tough to have a firm grasp on that, but I think that giving him somewhere around a point per minute is reasonable. It's just a matter of, do you think that he's getting 20 minutes like last night's game suggested he would, or is he more likely to get around 16 like he would if Morris plays like 32? I think the answer is that it's probably more likely he gets around 16.
All right. There you have it. Hey, Live Before Live coming up next. Thanks to all you for tuning in. Good luck tonight. Before you head out, hit that thumbs up button. Easiest way to support the show. And we love you for it. We'll catch you back here tomorrow, closing out the work week on the Deeper Dive presented by Super Draft.
All right, what's up, guys? We should be starting up now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Awesome.com Live Before Lock show. Got ourselves a 5-game slate where we've got most of the news we need, but still a decent amount out there we're going to want to know, hopefully, before this show ends. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by one of the smartest men in DFS, man who I would say equal parts in both me and him yesterday contributed to a lot of people winning tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Mr. Fast Eddie Fear, how are you doing, Eddie?
I'm doing well. Yeah, it got undersold a little bit. I've heard mention that we had a 100K winner last night. I heard somebody else say we had 2. Actual number was 3. There were 4 prizes in the entire industry of $100,000 or more last night. We got 3 of them. We missed one, but I think it was maybe we didn't miss one. I don't know. But 3 people caught me tweets last night of having won 6 digits, and then there was. One guy turned $8 into $2,000. One guy turned $24 into $9,000. One guy turned like $50 into I think 11, and then it was an outstanding evening. I think it passes Dragic Day and JaVale McGee Day, which was a great day for best day of the year. So that was very personally rewarding for both of us, I would presume.
Yeah, no, it's always great seeing those tweets come in, sometimes in the middle of the night, but a lot of guys there, including one of the guys we made sure to address, who was in the steak of fish thing, which I didn't see the full story of, but tried to catch up a little bit on Twitter. Our guy Colby Landers, who ended up doing really well in that $2,000 tournament, thanks to, I think it was Mock Lovin and Empire Maker, I believe, who staked him in that tournament.
Those 2 guys said whoever, I think I'm quoting it accurately when I say hit the nastiest bong rip or whatever via, and he took some mango and had a nice seed. He'd put the top into this. I mean, I was jealous. I don't know if I was more jealous of his homemade fruity bong or the $100,000. They were both very appealing to me. But yeah, he very low stakes player, got comped a $2,020 entry based on those 2 high rollers. And bravo to you, gentlemen, for giving something back. And then proceeded to come in second in that tournament for a hot 100K. And then the largest tournament on DK, I think we won for 100K. And then that was Lizard King, I think. Yeah. And then the gentleman who watches the show, who was on FanDuel, took down first place in there 444 for 100K. So those 3 men, really nice stuff. A couple of them were nice enough to contact me, and we arranged some charitable donations. That was nice. A couple others have said they will do so. Again, I'm always happy to facilitate that in the event you should be so fortunate. But really motivating for me. Sometimes it's a lot of time and it's difficult for me to get everything done I have to get done. But yesterday were a couple things where particularly I did really deep dives and watched a video, and those one or two things made a lot of difference. So it's makes it easier for me to get back at it every day. So for however long I'm doing this, that was some very nice motivation for me. So great night all around. Some very kind things said, and full credit to those guys, each of which, maybe one of my favorite parts was that they were describing their process. It was such a good process. And they're like, I've heard about this from you and other people, yourself included. And so I went with this, and it's just, it was really encouraging to see them really, theory crafting the experiment. So lots of fun all around. I did not get nearly enough sleep last night, but very exciting.
Yeah, a lot of fun. Always see people doing well. So we hope you guys are doing well. Hit that like button. Also, shout out already to Baldy and the Oaf, who was the guy you mentioned who turned $8 into $2,000. He said, thank you, Chris and Eddie, in his super chat. So thank you, Baldy. Thank you also to the Oaf, who I'm sure sounds like a lovely person too. But we're glad you guys are doing well. Obviously, the thing here, as Eddie mentioned, Colby got there with a big bong rip. And you know what, Eddie? I'm also a fan of drugs. And one thing that makes me feel like I'm on drugs with pure euphoria is playing at Super Draft, superdraft.io, the future of DFS. I step in there all the time, just checking out to see what's going on in their multiplier tournament style, where you can build your own dream teams because salaries aren't a consideration. It's a multiplier format. You can pick any player, and that's how you get your tournament winnings. So go check out Super Draft right now at superdraft.io and use the promo code AWESEMO. Get yourself $20 on a deposit of $100 or more at superdraft.io, or download Superdraft on the App Store. But go check them out. Get yourself that $20 because it's instant release, and that's the type of money that helps you build your bankroll. All right.
I really enjoy my job sometimes. That's segue by you. And for those who are wondering why I was cackling wildly when the show started, Alex himself, Awesemo, who deserves a ton of credit for not only being the best DFS player in the world, incredibly smart guy building this successful company of which you and I are employees, but also I'm not afraid to get his hands dirty and do some of the dirty work frequently while setting his, I think he plays about $10 to $12 million a night in volume. That could be an exaggeration, but he's obviously playing some significant volume, still hitting all the buttons to make this show go. So he's prompting us to go on air. And I can't do a good Awesemo impression, though I'd love to try, but he has a reasonably flat affect. So everything he says comes off with a very, I don't know, but things are unintentionally amusing all the time. And so he's setting us up and he's like, I think I got this set up. You're live. And it was just incredibly funny because it just came like 1/2 second after he was like, and you're on. And it's like, oh, okay. So I found that very amusing. I swear I'm not currently inebriated and I don't have any mango around me, but I'm finding a lot of things very funny right now. Let's get to work.
Let's get to work. One last super chat. Shout out to our boy Dave Hanna. Thank you, Eddie and Spags. Had a good night as well. You know, everything is all relative. As long as you guys are doing well, as long as you're approaching things the right way, that's really all we care about. Having the right information in front of you. One way to have that right information, of course, is an Awesemo membership. So go right now to awesemo.com/join and use that promo code live before lock. All the data we talk about, ownership projections, Eddie's own rankings, they're available to you at awesemo.com/join. So use that promo code live before lock for half off your first week. All right, Eddie, we got a chalk play of the day here, which to me, Adam, I think summed it up really well in the deeper dive, as is always the case. The show on right before us, Lofty and Adam do a great job. And Adam, always good at distilling the viewpoints that I want to have in a much more succinct way. Monte Morris, I'm worried about him as the chalk play of the day. We just had a run of ownership. He's now not the number one overall owned play on DraftKings. Another play I'm worried about is one of his teammates. But on Fanduel at a minimum price, I think he's harder to pass up there. How do you feel about Monte Morris? What is your read on him? He's going to be starting for Jamal Murray, who's out of the lineup. Also, Gary Harris out. And Morris did start the second half yesterday. Wasn't that productive, but he was going against a Charlotte team who's also limited point guards pretty well. Decent point guard defense by them overall, not just the DVP thing, just overall. Just look at their numbers and how they perform on tape. So how do you feel about Monte Morris? And are you ready for him as chalk?
Let's see. What do we have for chalk? We have that number. I'm fine with that. I don't think that's outrageous. I suspect it will actually be to some degree higher due to it being a particularly strong matchup as well for me against Golden State. But the absence, the paucity of other wonderful value, you always have to take these things relative to each other. So when you talk about the most owned value plays today, for example, about on DraftKings, you have Tice and Mccall Bridges and obviously Michael Porter Jr. and Mccall Bridges. There's nothing that jumps off the page as super upside guy, and I have concerns with all those plays. So Monte Morris would be the fact that he's often a fairly low usage guy. Some of the stats I've seen quoted on him today, usually in opposition of his inclusion in the lineup, aren't terribly well curated, because they're talking about with this guy on and this guy off, and his normal role in the bench unit with the players that he's alongside does have a lot to do with that. And the minutes are weighted to times in which the team was playing a lot slower and missing key personnel. So I think it's a little overly dismissive. I'm a fan of getting away from bad chalk, or chalk that's just higher than it should be. Right now we have a projection for those top two Nuggets guys in the mid 30s. I don't feel that either of those is unreasonable. If that number hits 60, 70, which we've seen on value chalk this year that I had real issues with, yeah, I would take up arms against the sea of bad chalk. But I don't find that number to be unreasonable on a 5-game slate, which really has to be something else you take into account here. The ownership of anyone at random boosts up the fewer games on the slate, obviously fewer options from which to select. So I don't mind it that much. I think concern is warranted, but I'm talking about the number of other options to look at. It ends up being a really site-specific call you're making. I will say on Fanduel, and I have no idea what his ownership is going to be there, where did you mention he was the minimum price?
Yeah. I mean, the minimum price is to me, that's why he's more appealing at 4,400 on DK.
I thought he was 4,000 on DK. I did a roll earlier today, and I want to double check that. I don't think
4,000 on Fanduel. He's 4,400 on DK.
That's what I meant. Sorry, but I meant he's not the minimum on Fanduel. He is proportionally.
Right. Yes,
he's closer to it, but he's still 5. Oh, I just wanted to make sure that we.
Yeah, I don't play on Fanduel. That's my bad. I sometimes forget that. But yes, you're right.
No problem. So and it's worth pointing out so obviously both Fanduel and DraftKings have had a couple significant revisions to their pricing algorithms this year. They've been kind of all over the place, at least 2 that I know of. But there's an interesting value metric where as you get lower down and closer to, say, 4,000, value on Fanduel becomes better because of its distance from the floor and the tax. Again, there's a whole interesting, I used to play a ton of cash, and I had sort of a universal currency. I won't go into the entire thing, but basically what's relevant is that there's a factor in building your lineups on a given site, where Fanduel, you'll look at it and people say, okay, you have 9 players and you get $60,000. You really don't. They spend more than half that money for you. There's a tax of $3,500, which you have to play. So correctly done, and this is where the math gets complicated, you ignore it. So you actually have $28,500 because they spend 9 times $3,500 for you, which is 31.5. So you actually only get $28,500 to spend. So Monte Morris there isn't really 4,000. He's really 500. And then there's an inherent cost you have to factor in where there's a cost of a slot. Like very rarely, if there was a player who cost 0, and I mean literally 0, not 0 over the tax. So I don't mean 3,500. I mean actually 0. If there's a guy who costs 0 and gave you 6 fantasy points, would you want it? Usually the nature of the beast precludes that. I won't go into the all of the math behind that, but suffice to say, Monte Morris is a better play there. Where now the complication on Fanduel is everybody is way the hell too cheap. The pricing there is busted today. I don't know what's going on. This is just Fanduel alone. Kemba Walker is 6,700 with no Jaylen Brown. That's too cheap. Lonzo Ball, who's been finally doing what I expected him to all year because he's looked good, 6,500. That's too cheap even in that matchup. Ricky Rubio is 63. That's too cheap in that matchup. Elfrid Payton is 57. I really like that. Markelle Fultz, shout out last night again, 5,500. I really like that. So those guys are all much too cheap. And the fact that even the other studs largely and the other guys you're paying for are also so cheap, the value of the value is less by default. So long story short, I actually would probably be a bigger fan on DraftKings at a significantly worse price because of those 2 external factors, the positionality and the sort of the value curve and just the generic mispricing on FanDuel today. But I don't feel that on DraftKings specifically, a ownership in the mid-30s is inordinate. I think that's about where that number should lie. I'll be very ambivalent to go over another topic of yesterday. on that ownership, should that hold when we get to lock. I will speculate for the record, and again, that is a late game, so we will not be able to daddy like that one. But if we did and we came up with a number of 37%, I'd shrug at it. I suspect it will actually, if everything remains the same, be a little higher than that. I guessed you would be at 42 when someone asked me about an hour ago, and I'll stick that I think that it will be a little bit higher. But yeah, it's not unreasonable. The matchup is really incredibly strong, and for that reason, I have him at 30 minutes.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but Porter too, I feel like you might as well kind of talk about both these guys in one swath, because Porter's also projected to be right in the same lane. And I think he may be more tempting for some people because he has the big box score yesterday, whereas Morris, I think the casual player, a lot of people going to be watching this, I think are going to see Morris's box score and just kind of go, all right, well, maybe I'm not buying it on that hype. But the Porter chalk, I think, is one people have been dying for. So talk to me about him too, relative to the ownership, because Morris and Porter, I think, are two also very different stories.
Well, they are. And the issue with Michael Porter Jr. is that he doesn't do anything but score, and that hasn't been made as clear. He is in that he is very similar to, say, Bojan Bogdanovic as a player, in which you need all your points to come from points. I mean, all of them. And the shooting he's had is largely unsustainable. Last game got, I think, 28 minutes, 13 shots, made 7. That's higher. He's not going to shoot 54% from the field most of the time. Game before that, he was 6 for 8 from the field in, I think it was 20 minutes. Certainly not going to shoot 75% from the field much of the time. Picked up a couple steals in those games. That will generally not be a big part of his game. And if you go back and look at his stats even before entering the NBA, I would expect that to be the case. So again, I feel better about $4,400 Monte Morris than $3,600 Michael Porter Jr. Now, the issue is, as of this soliloquy I'm going on here, there's really nothing else I want to look at that costs $3,600 or less. So because the pricing is tougher and because some value makes it possible to play some studs I really like, Jokic, Leonard, to a lesser degree for me, Giannis, I think that ownership is still appropriate. But if those guys both end up being on 35, 37%, I would feel better about my Monty shares than my Michael Porter Jr. shares. I think the Monty minutes are more solid. You might get 28 minutes out of Michael Porter Jr. again, but with Gary Harris and Jamal Murray out the entire game, I can envision them giving extra time to either Wancho or maybe Malik Beasley, or like there's a couple ways this goes. I still haven't projected at 29 minutes. I think that's likely, but I'm much more sure that Monte Morris gets his. I have him at 31, and that could even be greater. I can envision more ways in which Michael Porter Jr. plays only 24 minutes or something. And if he shoots 5 for 15 from the field, he's going to end up with 16 fantasy points. So, but just because of it, all things are relative. People ask me like advice. There's 2 days a week I try to take off, and I frequently get questions on those days. And they're like, I know you know about this. Can you answer this question? Do you like this guy? And I'm like, I can't answer that question because every answer is relative to everyone else on the slate. So, even if I knew half the slate and there's these 2 guys I really like, there could be 2 guys I like more on the other half, which means that these guys are not my favorite value options. So I would actually dislike them proportionally. Same sort of thing with Michael Porter Jr. I like him because I don't have any choices. But I would say the bust potential, in my opinion, is higher for MPJ. Sorry, Renpack, than for Monte Morris, who I think would average out in this role as a more productive player. I have him more likely getting something like 31 minutes, 28 fantasy points. That projects much better for me. So I don't mind the Michael Porter Jr. ownership. He makes a lot of sense. If I'm going to get away from one of them, it would be him before I got away from Monty.
So one more piece of Denver value, which I'm going to assume you're not into because you said Porter Jr. was sort of the cheapest guy who was coming up and you're on your radar, but PJ Dozier, a G League superstar, almost a triple-double guy in the G League, came up yesterday, had really big performance in 13 minutes, played that second half too, which Monte Morris started. Dozier didn't play in the first half, did play in the second half. It's kind of surprised that Malik Beasley didn't get in the second half, but they just went to Dozier. Dozier got hot. He contributed rebounds, assists. The points are really where he had the most money. But how are you feeling about him here? Because Adam mentioned him. Like if he gets 16 minutes, I think he's a tough play. If he gets to 20 minutes, I think he could be a very strong play. And he's going to be a little bit owned, not terribly owned. We had him in We had him under 10%, but very close to 10% our most recent run of ownership. Is Dozier in play for you at all? Because I think he's at least an interesting pivot to Porter Jr. in a few lineups, and I'll probably have more than I should just because I'm irresponsible.
Well, no, so it's not unreasonable. I think, again, the minutes there end up being somewhat specious. Malik Beasley is probably on his way off this team. They've gone away from him in several spots, including yesterday with everything going on there. He played, I want to say that was 7 minutes. I did not rank him because, and I did rank not BJ Johnson. Sorry, BJ Johnson is actually sort of the other 3K value pivot you can look at here relative to, there's a PJ Dozier. That's the one we're talking about in Denver. And then there's BJ Johnson, who also, by the way, has playing for Lakeland for the Magic, had a number of very impressive games as well.
Looks a lot like Terrence Ross on the court too, because they both wear a headband.
The headband,
similar builds. It's a little confusing, but
yeah,
wasn't bad yesterday.
A little bit. No, he wasn't bad at all either. And I suspect that ownership ends up being lower. So I don't mind having 15% PJ Dozier or but potentially if I got news that Etuan Moore was going to be out, excuse me, not Etuan Moore, like I'm going back to old Magic days and old rotations in my head. If I got news that Evan Fournier was going to be out, I would probably rather play BJ Johnson because I actually would have those guys projected almost identically. And I expect the ownership to be lower there due to largely Fournier being questionable, but also just the degree of pub I've seen out of those guys today. So if Fournier ends up in and you told me you have 15% of PJ, I would say that's fine. If Fournier ends up out and I had 15% of PJ, I would want to turn some of that into BJs.
Whenever you can turn things into BJs, I think you're winning in life generally.
Put that one on the tee for you.
No, it was, it was too easy. I felt it was coming out like, oh no, but that's life. Denver, other guys who could benefit, because Will Barton's a guy I am on here. I do think he can get there if Morris has a decent day. He can get there if Morris doesn't have a decent day. He definitely has a higher likelihood of getting there if Morris does fail today. I like Barton quite a bit. I'm going to be over the field on him. Ownership doesn't seem like it's that sharp on him, but
where's the ownership?
Yeah, 1.3 fantasy points per minute on him. He's got 13% right now on DraftKings. The price may be a little weird. Projection doesn't pop because it's just under a 5x value that tends to make people blind to a guy. But I like Barton quite a bit. Barton and Jokic too, I think, are going to benefit. But Barton's certainly cheaper and more affordable. How are you feeling about Barton's prospects and also Jokic? I guess who else do you find to be a beneficiary of the situation with no Murray and no Harris?
Yeah, I think that would be a bad projection if they have him that low based on the back substitutions we saw in the second half yesterday, and I guess the last couple minutes of the first half. But I really, really like Barton. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Barton if that's the number where he's coming in at. I thought that number would be well higher. I think due to the lack of value on DraftKings and the inappropriate pricing on FanDuel, I would end up preferring Jokic on FanDuel and Barton on DraftKings. You can play both. You can play both with Morris. You can play both with Morris and Porter, probably, believe it or not. That's actually not an unreasonable idea against Golden State in Golden State. Past that, you may be getting a little creepy there. But yeah, I'm a big fan of those guys. I think the value that we've seen and the, without Murray on the court underlays the extent to which those two guys should dominate this game. You're worried about some kind of blowout, but I think that Barton, both sides, is brilliant. And I think that Jokic, both sides, is brilliant. I'm a big fan of them. They both rank double A's in my rankings. I am more excited to play either of those guys than the other two. Now, the presence of value plays and the structure limitations of one center on FanDuel, I don't think I would have quite as much of them as Morris and Porter, but if we're looking at ownerships in the 15 to 20% range for them, I would make a concerted effort to get on top of those.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, Barton, I just wanted to put that flag down now. He's one of my top owned plays on DK today, and I'm willing to go there. And I think, too, you mentioned Michael Porter Jr., just a pure scorer. Barton is one of those guys, contributes in every possible category. He'll get those rebounds, especially against a small Golden State front court, a guy in Spellman who doesn't rebound that well. Or if you have Willie. I mean, Willie's not that impressive off the bench lately with how he's performed this year.
Yeah, I'm not shocked to see Will Barton triple-double here.
Yeah, I agree.
He's going to handle the ball. Like this is the most likely triple-double spot for him this year, and he has gotten there in his career. So, yeah, he's a fairly significant priority for me.
So let's take a trip over to some other value here. Another injury-based ruling, or I guess status that's going to affect some of the guys here for Phoenix. Kelly Oubre out with a concussion. Mccall Bridges picking up the start. Dario Saric also going to pop up probably a lot with whatever projections you are using across the industry. Should be using ours at awesemo.com/join with the promo code live before lock. But tell me how. Hey, just segging all over the place here. Tell me about Phoenix. Who do you think benefits? Ricky Rubio coming back to the rotation after he missed last game with the birth of his son. A very beautiful clip out there, which I saw during my daily Ricky Rubio search of him almost tearing up talking about his new son. Pretty adorable. But I'm big on Ricky in the spot. 1.2 fantasy points per minute without Kelly Oubre on the floor when with Devin Booker. Booker should also benefit, but the price is getting close to untenable on DraftKings in particular. But who benefits on Phoenix with the guys that are out?
Everyone. Kelly Oubre had been playing 40 minutes, maintaining a very significant bit of usage there. And everyone benefits with him out in a very strong matchup. So I will be interested to see, have they put out a lineup yet? And I've missed it because I've been looking for a Suns lineup for a while here. And it's pretty important because I have 5 possible starting lineups out here. They have said that Bridges will start. So you're going to get the backcourt of Booker and Rubio. Bridges will come in. I do think the most likely is that being followed by Saric and Baines, because that's what they've been doing recently. This can go a whole lot of ways. I like Cam Johnson. I would rather play Cameron Johnson on DraftKings than play either of the $3,000 guys you and I were just discussing, PJ and BJ, or Damian Dotson, who I think would be 4th on this list for me, but the absence of Bullock with those guys back in, actually, he doesn't rank terribly well for me at all, because now we have Morris coming back, which affects Knox and other things, and knocks Dotson down to likely playing 12 or 15 minutes for me. Would still be in play for me, but he would be after PJ and BJ, who I would actually have after Cameron Johnson. I have Cam Johnson for 28 minutes here. Not a ton to say past that. It's a very good matchup for him. I'm a bigger fan of playing Cameron Johnson than I am Mccall Bridges, simply because you're getting popular Mccall Bridges, and he is very just guy I don't want to take when he's popular. Mccall Bridges is very similar in fantasy to
PJ Tucker, the young PJ Tucker.
PJ Tucker isn't bad. Chris Dunn would be another player where he's very similar to. Very good defensive player, blocks, steals, deflections. Big fan, but this is not a massive. I mean, it is a plus matchup, and you're going against the Knicks. They're sloppy. You can certainly accrue those sorts of defensive stats, but he's already been playing many games, 30, 32 minutes. Now today I have him projected for 34, which feels very good. But the extra ownership doesn't make me want to chase that. So I would rather go with Cam Johnson, who's going to be well less owned and save me $1,400 on DK and $900 on Fanduel, I think are what the numbers come out to. I would rather take that shot at the ownerships we're looking at for these guys. You can play Mccall Bridges any day, but he doesn't project that differently today than he does in another day against the Knicks. Plenty of guys on his team will still take some shots. Ayton's out there. He's been gunning. You have Rubio. You have Booker. It's still, I won't say it's a zero number, but the PJ Tucker analogy is we just had the game the other day where he was chalk, and I crapped all over him because I'm like, it doesn't make any difference for him. It's actually harder for him because it's harder for him to get open. It's easier for the defense to just keep an eye on him and keep an eye on Harden when you don't have Westbrook out there, and he went out, played that game, played 30 whatever minutes and took one shot. Mm-hmm. That's not dissimilar to this situation. I wouldn't say it's as significant of a detriment. And it's more likely he gets there than Tucker does in that situation, where I would call this still a net positive for him, whereas Tucker, I thought, was literally worse than average Tucker and chalky. This is still better than average Mccall Bridges, but still I don't want to go there when it's chalky. So I don't have an issue if you get there. I do prefer Monte Morris as one of the head-to-heads. I've seen a lot to Mccall Bridges, obviously, through the context of this conversation. I don't hate having some, but again, just sort of qualifies as that player where I'm not trying to get on him when he's very popular. His game is not the direct mathematical relationship between available usage and his production is similar to PJ Tucker, lowly correlated.
So you said that all these guys, the Suns, are all going to benefit, which makes a lot of sense given Oubre's usage in minutes. Yeah. How would you rank these guys? I mean, we don't like to do rankings when unsolicited because it's putting on the spot, but ranking these guys relative to prices and value and all of that. How would you want these guys tonight if you're building a lineup? Because I think you want to have a Sun, I would think, but
Yes, I think not having a Son with Oubre out against the Knicks would be a bad place to start. I would say on DraftKings, it would probably be Booker, Ayton, Rubio for me. I think on FanDuel, it would actually be Rubio, Booker, Ayton as the pricing nuances. I'm a fan of all three, not a overwhelmingly massive fan of any. There's none of them where I'm like, get this guy in your lineup. But I do think it's and it's just the prices on DK aren't that great, and there's studs that I like a little bit more, and I can get away from Ayton and Bridges again. I spoke about him at length, so I like them all. I definitely want to have one. If I made 10 lineups, probably try to make sure I had at least one Sun in each of them. I don't have a problem if the number comes out as 2, but like Denver a little bit more, and just the nuances of the slate make it still very appealing for me. I mean, it's against the Knicks, and without Oubre there, I do think it is a very good spot, but not as much of a windmill slam spot as I presumed it would be at the start of the day. So fine with Cam, fine with Saric. Do we have news yet that he's starting? Again, I think that's the most likely scenario, but I'm a little perplexed.
Yeah, still nothing yet.
Peculiar. Yeah, so on DK, I would rather have Booker at top by a little bit. And obviously, there's a very big upside there. And again, we did see this game. This is the run back, the final version of this from earlier this year, and Oubre had some 50 in that matchup with basically everyone in. That was during the period of time that they started Baines and Ayton. I don't think they do that today. I've heard that suggested as something they do. I wouldn't be shocked if they went back to it, but I think they'll start Saric again, who is also plenty big for matching up with the big Knicks front court, and that didn't make any sense. And playing DeAndre Ayton at the 4 is, I don't think, good for his long-term development, among other things, and they just have plenty of other guys to go out there. So I'm pretty sure they'll start Saric at the 4 again. You can get to Dario Saric. I have him at 24 minutes, which will be more than he's played in quite some time now, but I think he picks up a little time, and he's cheap, and it's a 5-game slate, so you can get some Dario Saric. Yeah, Saric, Cam Johnson, Mccall Bridges, Ayton, Baines. If he starts 4,300, not super exciting, 43 and 42, I think it is. You can get to that. I think the most likely scenario is high teens in minutes, but great matchup. Really productive guy from time to time. Can make some
also, you are correct. Saric is starting Rubio, Booker, Bridges, Saric, and Ayton.
There you go. Yeah, I thought that was the most likely scenario. Them doing that against the Knicks, again, it was something they were doing. They were like, Ayton's back. Let's shake the rattle a little bit. He was suspended for a while. Let's let him try to start some games at the 4. And yeah, that was not a great idea.
We've got 2 super chats here. Let's just burn through real fast before we get to the rest of the slate. Darren Unger, thank you for the super chat, asking Fultz, Bridges, and Ayton, or Morris, Johnson, and Jokic. No site given.
Please comment telling me which Morris you're talking about. I'm having trouble with the math. There are several. Yeah. Let's move on and do the other one. Then I have a couple things.
The other one from Steve. Steve Finkelstein, one of Lofty's regulars. So shout out Steve. Always hear his name shout out on the deeper dive. On a per dollar value, who's your favorite center play on FanDuel between Ayton, Harrell, and Jokic? And for FanDuel only, would you go Lonzo Ball or Rubio? So favorite center play between those 3, and then the other question.
I would probably prioritize them top down. I'm most excited out of those 3 to play Jokic, then Ayton, then Harrell, even at their FanDuel prices. I have Jokic as someone I'm prioritizing more than the other 2 by a pretty significant margin. The other 2 I would have very close. But Jokic is the guy I'm trying to get in there. Per dollar, as far as my actual projection, they're going to be incredibly close. I have Harrell 0.02 higher than Jokic, who I have very slightly higher than Ayton. So point per dollar, they're incredibly similar. If I can get the same point per dollar spending more money, I'm going to do that. So, yeah. So Jokic is my priority there.
Let's cover some of the other chalk plays here that we haven't hit on yet. D'Angelo Russell, he's a guy on DraftKings in particular who will be coming up a lot for people today. A tough matchup for him, but the usage has been there in a really meaningful way. Didn't get there in that last game. Before that was around 50 fantasy points for those 3 that he's been healthy for before. Spot here seems good for him. I think there's certainly some risk with the matchup, but the matchup's also weaker with no Gary Harris and no Jamal Murray, but definitely Harris in particular. How would you feel about Russell today as a chalky player? Are you willing to go there with a really reasonable price for him, but a tough matchup on paper theoretically, if we're thinking of Denver from last year in particular?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, let me go see what chalky means exactly before I answer this. We have him as the third highest owned player in the slate. I would come in under that. I have him raw projection about 2 points behind Donovan Mitchell, who we have as the next guy, but we have him 5% or lower owned than Russell and $100 less. So I like D'Angelo Russell just fine. 7,500 is a little too cheap. This is a Denver team whose defense has been bad recently, not worse, bad. You remove Millsap is huge. Removing Harris is they're going to be a bad defensive team tonight. So the matchup is not any kind of consideration for me. The pace, yes. The matchup, not at all. And after this, I want to ramble and answer. I have like 5 questions, and guys, I should talk about before we get too late in the show. So that's actionable information.
Yeah, the Celtics seem like the one we should go to next because of no Jaylen Brown in there, and also a tough matchup against Milwaukee. And a guy that I'm intrigued by is Marcus Smart. And I just off the top of my head, I was like, he's the guy that Milwaukee's going to let him shoot threes. I forgot they played earlier this year and looked it up. They did let him shoot 11 threes, and he took 11 threes shamelessly in that game. Gordon Hayward also went nuts in that spot. Same situation without Jaylen Brown, but with Tatum, with Smart, with Hayward, with Kemba. How are you feeling about the Celtics today? Who do you think is going to benefit, or will any of them in this road spot against Milwaukee on a back-to-back?
Yeah, as you alluded to, this is the exact team that played them. Jaylen Brown did not play that game. So again, we have we've switched locales a little bit, but we have the exact same starting lineups on both sides. I think I'd have to look, but I think they had the same starters in that game. So yeah, I'm 99% sure this is the same starting lineups we saw in that game. My favorite of these guys would be a little site dependent, but just sort of in a vacuum, I would rank my preference between Tatum, Kemba, and Hayward as Kemba on top in this spot. This is a fascinating game as someone who likes basketball to watch. And we've gotten an extended period. We had a 5-game postseason series last year, a 7-game postseason series the game before that, and they play 3-4 times a year. So, I've been lucky enough to, I really enjoy watching this as someone and watching what you get out of Budenholzer and Brad in these particular matchups. But I really want to talk about it for about 20 minutes, but I'll just cut to the quick here. On the Bucks, my favorite player would be Chris Middleton. And I'm also going to get him really low owned. It is the exact same play as Russell Westbrook last night. Frequently, I get you have a good day, and the next day people go, who is today is blank? So I've gotten 6 today Russell Westbrook questions. The closest I can get you is Chris Middleton. Again, these teams have played massively, and the Celtics deploy extra Ojale, and now we don't have any Horford, obviously, on the Celtics, which certainly changes things up and makes it a little easier for Giannis, but it is not a good spot for Giannis. And if I get a second, I'll throw a wall of stats at you. But it is, I would probably have it as the 3rd or the 4th worst matchup in the NBA for Giannis. The Celtics do a very good job of doing sort of a 2-2 swap defense against him, and then you frequently get Budenholzer going to a 1-3-1, and you end up with Middleton frequently cutting that back line, and there's a whole thing that I'd love to do a little. I need a telestrator. Put that in the budget. Anyhow, long story short, if you go back, and I'll try to quantify this in a second, and just look at production from these guys, in fact, I'm certain Middleton is the player who has excelled most in those games. If you look at those 18 games relative to their prices, you are going to have Middleton being better than Giannis, better than Bledsoe, who is bad, better than Brook Lopez, who is bad. I would guess Brook Lopez averages like 1/2 of a point per minute in this matchup. It's horrific for him. I'll look it up when I get a second. But long story short being, it's bad for Lopez. It's bad for Bledsoe. It's well below average for Giannis. Getting Horford out of there is going to help you a little bit. Having some extra time is going to help a little bit. But we talk a lot about how, Giannis is 1.8, 1.9 fantasy points per minute. Again, I'll look up the math and do this. If you took the massive sample of the 20 games he's played against the Celtics over the last 2 years, counting postseasons, I would guess that number is like 1.4, maybe 1.5. I'd be shocked if he got to 1.6, let alone 1.7 and 1.8. So you can obviously play Giannis. I have Giannis as the highest scoring player on the slate. He's great. there is a ceiling there. If you looked at those 20 games, I think he capped out at about 70 in 2 of them. Probably averaged somewhere around 52, 54, 55. I think I have him at 57. 57 could very possibly be good enough, but the value isn't great. So I am not overwhelmingly a fan of Giannis tonight. Ceiling is there, could certainly happen. But Chris Middleton, especially on Fanduel, who's going to be incredibly low on because shooting guard is stacked there. Every position is stacked because they just knocked 20% off everyone's salary for no particular reason. But especially at the very close pricing to Bledsoe, or not to Bledsoe, to Donovan Mitchell on Fanduel, who's criminally underpriced. I suppose maybe someone is watching this show and hasn't previously seen content today. They might not notice. Play Donovan Mitchell on Fanduel. He's not quite 100% play for me because only of all the other great plays. But if he'd have been that price yesterday in this matchup on Fanduel, I might have yesterday, because the pricing wasn't so easy, have thrown like 100% at him. That is a criminal underprice. I think Donovan Mitchell is a great play. I like him more than, for example, D'Angelo Russell today for a little more money on DraftKings. He's criminally underpriced on Fanduel. So Donovan Mitchell on Fanduel would be a significant priority for me, where I imagine he's going to be very heavily owned. But yeah, looking at that game, Kemba, especially Fanduel, where that price is low, is the guy I most like to get through what I expect the Bucks to deploy as a defense, and Chris Middleton is the guy I expect most to excel for the Bucks. Now, neither of them carry the upside that, for example, Westbrook did, which was a similar example of how the defense deploys there. You know what James Harden's usage was in that game yesterday? Because they threw the defense at him, and I expected
25,
19.
Wow. Okay.
Right. James Harden, 19, less than average on the team. This not quite as strong of a lean as that, and it is a matchup which over those 2 years we've seen those defenses evolve to a certain extent, but talking about it too much. So yeah, long story short, FanDuel, you can play any of these guys. I barely have Kemba over Hayward on FanDuel because he's so incredibly cheap. He's 58. That's a very nice price with no Jaylen Brown. Can certainly still go back to Tice. Not a great spot for him. Was you alluded to the game first week of the season? I think these two teams got together, and Tice was started that game, was serviceable. I think had somewhere around 20 fantasy points in 25, 28 minutes, somewhere in that range. But 4K and the rest of the value is obviously crap. It's not terribly surprising. Like if you said who is the top owned of those four players, I think the most likely highest scoring of the chalk would be Monte Morris at like 30%, and then you'd end up with 23, 19, and 18 of Mccall Bridges or Daniel Tice or Michael Porter Jr. So I would make sure to have some exposure to Tice, just simply because the value is very poor at these $4,000 on DraftKings. That's a very nice number. Not a spot I want to try the Enes Kanter game, which is one of the reasons I like Daniel Tice, is that the minutes could trend up and the Bucks would bludgeon the crap out of Kanter.
Yeah, the Tice thing yesterday with Kanter just getting nothing going off the bench and Tice going nuts. I mean, we talked about it on the show, but still not a fan of Turkey, but I could see their argument a little bit more after what Kanter did yesterday.
Not okay.
No, that's clearly
not okay.
You're not a big Giannis fan today. How about Kawhi, who's been a 1.6 fantasy point per minute guy without Paul George, and a tougher matchup against Orlando? But as we saw against Cleveland, he's been so remarkably efficient overall. Cleveland, a very different matchup, but Aaron Gordon too, as we saw against LeBron yesterday. He just really defended him extremely well at the point of attack, didn't let him even get going downhill at any spot, to the point where LeBron is missing dunks and just seemed in his own head a bit. How are you feeling about Kawhi's prospects?
LeBron missed a dunk because he's 35 and tired. Like it was
he looked rattled that whole game. He was standing around, a lot more standing around for LeBron than I'm used to.
Yeah, he's LeBron's endurance at hit. LeBron is, I believe, the 8th oldest player in the association. I think there are 7 players in the league who are older than LeBron James, and he's one of the top 5 players in the league. Like he's insanely good, but there is simply a point at which you can only handle so much, and 27-year-old LeBron does not miss that dunk. So I just think that's a gravity gets you at a certain point. Let me tell you, but yeah, I like Kawhi quite a bit. I still think he's underpriced. The matchup not incredibly important to me. Again, Not, I think I have them probably projected closer than Osmo and Josh or whomever other projections are out there today. But I think I have Kawhi at 52 and I have Giannis at 56.5 or something like that. So clearly that makes a Kawhi priority for me between the two of them, especially on DraftKings, because again, the value is especially crap. So on FanDuel, you can play Kawhi and still play really good players in every other position. DK, you have to suffer for it a little more, but not as much as you have to suffer if you roll out Giannis. Let me see if
is there anything else that you haven't hit on yet that we feel like we need to talk about? Because I feel like we spent a lot of time talking about the relevant value. We've got some questions queued up here in the Slack, but if there's anything,
I like Elfrid Payton well more than well more is a stretch. I like Elfrid Payton more than Markelle Fultz, but I believe we have him as higher owned, and he should be largely an artifact of the matchups. Fultz obviously massive last night. Again, on yesterday's show, I said, I think you see the career high in minutes for Markelle Fultz tonight. Narrative. We did. Not by a ton. Played 33 and a bit. But that was the most time he's ever spent in a game. I have him projected for 33 tonight, which seems to be more than other people. You could certainly see a little bit more if Fournier is out again, and depending on the BJ utilization, exactly how much BJ someone can take over a given 2-day period is a factor of age. But I still, just because of the matchup, I like Alfred Payton at his price quite a bit. Morris being back, I think, is actually a net positive for him based on what I've looked at. So, yeah, I have Elf a little bit ahead of Fultz. We have their ownership disparity at, which would factor into how much I like them. We have Elf as pretty significantly owned at 22%. We have Fultz not that much less at 20% and some change, if I'm reading this right. So at that point, I would still prefer to put Elfrid Payton in my single lineup between those two players. If Fournier sits, that ends up being very, very close for me. But I think Fournier plays today. Make a priority to late swap into some Evan Fournier in the event he gets rolled in. I have a Fournier plan. I would try to get a significant amount. It's a very nice spot for him, 6,200, not an overly onerous price. Yeah, the price on Lou Williams is still too cheap. I would make a priority having some reasonably significant amount of that, but we do again expect him to be owned. But you should have some Lou Williams exposure. You should have some Montrezl Harrell exposure. I prefer Williams again in this particular spot. I rank them Kawhi, Williams, Harrell as far as my degree of wanting to be exposed to those three guys. Let's see, other things we should talk about. I did the full Celtics whatever dance. I'll grab some.
Maybe New Orleans. I feel like that's one we haven't hit on with.
We certainly haven't discussed New Orleans extensively. So let me pull up my data here and look at a couple of things. So this is, I believe, the third time this year we have seen this particular matchup. And again, Donovan Mitchell did have some 50 Jan point whatever monster in, I think actually his monster game Conley was in. I think that's the one of the, I think Conley played one game and not the other one. That was one game. The other game was the game that Bojan Bogdanovic had 35 real points, 3 turnovers, and no other stats, which is a brilliant stat line we will rarely ever see again. He had 35 DK points, I remember. He had 35 points, 3 3-pointers, 3 turnovers, 35, which is just juicy. I prefer Mitchell fairly significantly there. Site dependent on pricing. I'm fine having some exposure to Ingles. But Donovan Mitchell, my priority on this team. I like the spot quite a bit for Gobert. You can certainly get to some. He missed one of these games earlier this year. You had a Tony Bradley start come out in one of these games, but I'd have some exposure. Not inordinate, but 10 or 15%. You can, in this spot, get a similar output to his Brooklyn game, but the presence of Derek Favors returning to the lineup, very relevant when we're talking about this. Fanduel point guard ends up being really tough for me, as we discussed before, because we have the somewhat ubiquitous Monte Morris. We have Elfrid Payton, who I'm a big fan of. We have Markelle Fultz for a couple $100 less. And then as you go up in price, I'm okay in this matchup getting away from $6,100 Eric Bledsoe, but that's not insane on a 5-game slate. And then you run me into $6,300 Ricky Rubio, which I really like, $6,500 Lonzo Ball, which I really like, and $6,700 Kemba Walker, who is somehow the highest priced point guard.
Also, Nikola Melli is starting alongside Brandon Ingram today. It is Ball, Hart, Ingram, Melli, and Favors. Do you want to chase the Melli tree? Do you want to shake it loose for one more Melli fruit today with this price up? Because it does seem like he is a guy who can space the floor pretty well for them, but I'm just not into it with Ingram in the lineup. I was very big on him.
I need to do some math. That I did not expect. Sell something for 20 seconds. Let me run some projections on what I expect to see out of New Orleans now.
Yeah, real fast. A quick promo for our UFC promo that we have going right now. $1 for 1 week of our MMA weekly Osmo Plus pass for UFC 246. Connor's back. Get some proper 12 in your life and enjoy that, as well as his return to fighting against Donald Cerrone this weekend. But check out our projections and data for that tournament right now for just $1 for that tournament. For that show for just $1 for 1 week right now at osmo.com/join. Use the promo code UFC246, UFC246, just like the fights. And it'll be giving you 1 week for $1 for MMA pass. So there's a lot of big tournaments for MMA, and people have done well with our projections at MMA this year. So get that promo out there. There you go.
So Ball, Hart, Ingram, Melli, Favors. Correct?
Yep, you got it. And Knicks are out too. Payton, Barrett, Morris, Randle, Gibson, which shout out to the news god.
As expected. I absolutely love Julius Randle. Thank you for getting there. Sorry. Julius Randle is one of my favorite plays on the slate. I feel like
even with Morris back in there, that kind of freaks me out.
Yeah, the matchup is particularly brilliant for him. They don't have anyone who can guard him. I don't like Morris in there. That moves him from me like being over the moon on him, but both 7,900, 8,000. That's a big priority for me. So I don't know what we have him projected at. I expect it to be somewhere in the 15% range. I'd be searching more for like 25%. I particularly like the spot for him. I like Randle quite a bit. I would sit there for a while looking at Randle and Payton with Morris back in.
Yeah, Randle's at 16% on DK and 18% on Fanduel. So
yeah, I would make a priority to have closer to 25. One of my favorite plays on the slate, probably a slight overhyping of that situation, but I do think it's a spot you can get a super ceiling out of him. All right, so he'll go there. He'll back him up. Maybe Frank does that. Then he backs up Jackson. Then here Ingram plays with the 4. Okay. I have Nikola Melli at 23.5 minutes. What does he cost?
He is 4,400 on DK.
I have very little interest.
Yeah, if he were minimum price again, it'd be great. But yeah, at 4,400, I just think it's not the spot to go to him.
Yeah, and again, obviously not the best matchup. 3,600 on FanDuel. Now that's a different kettle of fish. Let me compare him to some other power forwards real quick. And again, there is a ceiling for minutes. He started the last game with, no favors, with greater lineup issues and played some 36 minutes rather. I think there are some issues here that are a bit endemic that were not present at that point. So I think he plays whatever I just said a minute ago, but in the low 20s in minutes. You can safely ignore the Golden State front court. They have 5 guys that they could very reasonably play at center of this game. I imagine Smailjic gets entirely, ejected from the thing. They don't have to play any Draymond there, but now I'm dealing with Chris or Spellman, or there's just too many options for them. I don't think there's a need to take that particular risk. 3,600 on FanDuel. I imagine I'm going to be a little more optimistic. I would rather go there than Grant Williams. I would rather go there than basically all these guys. Nope, Sarge just 3,500. Never mind. Play Sarge.
Yep, I would agree with that too.
I'll still play Sarge against the Knicks than going with Melli against the Jazz. I would make sure I had some Melli on FanDuel. 3,600 is real price. Also, sorry, Michael Porter is apparently FanDuel is a power forward. I didn't realize that, but at 3,600, that also would rank. I think I have him projected for some 4 extra fantasy points. So I'd have to go there.
One last overall question from the Slack, and we will have some others there, but MC Grot's asking, how many Nuggets is too many for Eddie? What would be your general answer to that?
Again, that's always a tough question for me, simply because I don't know how many are value. If 2 of those Nuggets are Monte Morris and Michael Porter Jr., that really doesn't matter that much for me, because if those guys are good, it can be 26. And the difference for them being bad at 16 and good at 26 doesn't have a lot to do with limiting Will Barton and Jokic. So that ends up being it really has to be, is this much on this site too many for me to have any sort of educated answer to that question? As a generality, and again, depends with whether or not you are running it back with D'Angelo Russell or Alec Burks, by the way, who I still think deserves consideration on DraftKings at $4,900. as just the first couple guys. And Draymond is always going to be playable at that price of the minutes. Obviously, a movable feast. But generally, if you told me you had Jokic, Barton, and one of the value guys, I'd have no objection to that whatsoever. Adding the second value guy is getting a little too cute, so on and so forth. But I'm probably okay with what you're going to run out there, just because of the number of guys number of ways these guys can score. So I'm probably okay with it.
Oh, also same team here. We got actually we got two questions here because you mentioned earlier that you were very, very into Will Barton. So people are now asking, would you go to Brandon Ingram or would you pay down for Will Barton at the same spot?
Again, without knowing the site specifically you're talking about, that's a somewhat more complicated question. But on DraftKings, I'm a fan of both those players at their prices pretty significantly. With the news that they're going to start Melly next to Melly functionally at the 4 there, that would reduce my projection for Ingram by something like 1.25 points. That probably knocks him behind Barton for me. So as of this second, that answer is probably Barton for me.
Seems fair. Ben Forbes asking, is Mitchell Robinson in play on FanDuel?
I think he's like 47. Let me look at that number. And again, if that is the price, then he's the same price both sites. Yeah, he's 47. Yes, he's always going to be in play against Phoenix when his ownership is not inordinate. I don't know what we haven't projected at, but if that number is around 10%, which would be my guess, I think it's fine to be around that number. You can take a stand on it. I like it more on Mitch Robinson because if he's going to do the work, he's going to maybe get 7 blocks, and that's particularly juicy on FanDuel. So I like him more on FanDuel than DraftKings.
Also getting a question here from Matthew J. Can you play Fournier on FanDuel? Do you be willing to take that risk on a site where you can't swap?
It is a play that will lose you most of the time and be outstanding when it works out. It is worth pointing out that, again, it is a little more specious because of the fact that there is a lot of very good shooting guards on FanDuel. I like Booker at 88. I like D'Angelo Russell at 74. I like Middleton at 68, who everyone else is going to simply gloss over. And if I'm looking to get cute, that's probably where I'm getting cute. I like Lou Williams at 62. I can live with that. RJ Barrett. I like Marcus Smart at 5,000. I like Damian Lee at 4,900, who they've obviously made a priority to get back on this team. Lou at 62 is absurd. I don't care what the matchup is. And there's Terrence Ross at 46 is absolutely brilliant, and I like it well more against this team than against the Lakers. So I like him more than I did him at 44 yesterday. Hard at 41 is certainly a play. And Torrey Craig, they actually have a shooting guard there too at minimum price, who probably picks up that start. I can see going to. So there's many PJ Dozier minimum price there. I mean, so there's many options to go to at shooting guard. So I don't think I would on this slate because I need him to play and do exceptionally and better than a lot of other too cheap shooting guards. So in general, I like that play because I don't mind making a play that 1% of the time makes me a whole hell of a lot of money and fails on its face 90% of the time, including the half the time he doesn't play. But tonight you have to really want it. So it's the best answer I can give you. It has a lot to do with your own personal risk tolerance as well.
We also had some questions about Jackson Hayes, with people wondering if his size is going to be needed against Gobert. Do you think Hayes is a worthwhile play? Just, I guess, independent of site.
The 5-game slate, you can throw him in there at 4,400. His size does not factor into the equation.
Is 25% Monty and 25% Porter Jr. exposure enough on DraftKings?
I think it's fine. Yes, it's exposure enough. You're not that far under the field. Those guys are going to be 35, 40 each. So you're going to be under them. I have no issue being at 25% for each of them. That's not a radical departure. So sure, by all means.
Fultz and Middleton or Monte Morris and Ingram for a DKGPP?
At this point, I would play Fultz and Middleton. I like Middleton as a guy who, and I'm going to throw some data at everyone because I think we are locked.
Yep.
But let me. So I will stat muse this because my download didn't work, and I'm just going to say a lot of numbers here. But these are just going to be all games with the Bucks versus Boston over the last 2 seasons. Okay, here are Giannis's regular season DraftKings points outputs, and I'm going to put minutes in here for context too, because sometimes he had very good games in limited minutes. But he also played more minutes in all these games than he's likely to play today, maybe regardless. But here we go. If you just like piles of numbers. Here come some numbers. Let's see. Okay. We'll start here. 39 minutes, 55 fantasy points. 36 minutes, 57 fantasy points. 36 minutes, 55 fantasy points. 33 minutes, 52 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 61 fantasy points. That was at the end of last year. When they played at the beginning of this year, 35 minutes, 53 fantasy points. So that's 8 games, none of which should make you particularly tumescent. If we look at the postseason series, there's a lot of games here, so you'll excuse me, but here we go. 45 minutes, 67 fantasy points. Okay. 43 minutes, 55 fantasy points. 27 minutes, 43 fantasy points. That's probably the best points per minute of any of the 11 games I've talked about so far. And that's like 1.6 and change. 40 minutes, 42 fantasy points. 41 minutes, 51 fantasy points. 41 minutes, 58 fantasy points. 42 minutes, 43 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 40 fantasy points. 31 minutes, 53 fantasy points. That's not bad. That feels okay. 39 minutes, 69. Very good. That's a nice game. 34 minutes, 71. It's the best game. More than 2 fantasy points a minute. Bravo. Excellent game. 31 minutes, 48 fantasy points. That being the last game of the playoffs last year. So Horford not being there is certainly a relevant quantity. They just have a lot of and they've always had a lot of good bodies. Thurman, Tatum does a reasonable job. Ojale is going to play 22 minutes tonight instead of 14 because of the matchup. It's just not a particularly ideal spot. That was and I'll give you a couple others, which I should be able to pull down by doing a simple card replay. So Bledsoe, for example, and again, I'm a big Eric Bledsoe fan. I talk about Eric Bledsoe a lot. This is a pretty easy one. Bledsoe, 34 minutes, 29 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 24 fantasy points. 33 minutes, 26 fantasy points. 30 minutes, 24 fantasy points. 32 minutes, 9 fantasy points. 28 minutes, 20 fantasy points. So that's all the regular season games since he got to Milwaukee. They were all bad. Let's see if...
no scary Terry there anymore to get in his head, though. So
that must be it. Postseason was better. Not good, but the best of the postseason, we have a third. I'm going to save some time. In the postseason, out of the 12 games, he has a 35, a 36, and a 32, and a 31. So 4 times out of the 12 postseason games, he got over 30. He's never exceeded 36 in the 19 games I just rattled off. So I feel it's safe to say it's an unlikely ceiling spot for him. Again, it's not identical situations, but Middleton. Well, let's talk about Middleton. This is exciting because I was really worried that this take was going to be wrong. And no, looking at the numbers, this take is definitely right. All right, Middleton the last couple of years. We'll do regular season first. Okay, let's go 2018. Okay, 41 minutes, 43 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 49 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 33 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 43 fantasy points. 31 minutes, 40 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 39 fantasy points. Those were the regular season games. So he had 39 or more fantasy points, 5 of those 6 in the regular season. In the postseason series last year, where we got it, minutes in DK. Okay, here's the 2 postseason series over the last couple of years. 47 minutes. That was an overtime game. 57 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 32 fantasy points. Guess that's not great. 33 minutes, 49 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 42 fantasy points. 41 minutes, 31 fantasy points. 39 minutes, 25 fantasy points. It's a couple bad games in a row there. 41 minutes, 43 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 40 fantasy points. 33 minutes, 41 fantasy points. 39 minutes, 38 fantasy points. 37 minutes, 30 fantasy points. 34 minutes, 39 fantasy points. So over the same period of time, looking at the Bledsoe games and his games, and he does have 2 more games than Bledsoe because of the midseason trade. Bledsoe exceeded 36 fantasy points. Never. Chris Middleton did it. Oh, geez. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 times. So I feel
So
safe.
late swapped some Chris Middleton if you can now. You are a completionist. I got to the point that you were reading numbers at one point, and I tuned out. And then
I zoned out. Yeah, that was too much. But again, I'm a big fan of.
I was just like, "Are you kidding? You're still doing this?" Like,
I'm a big fan of trying.
You are a completionist.
I'm a big fan of. I'm not a completionist. I could throw the. You want to hear Brook Lopez? We got to look at Brook Lopez now because I want to see if that you're getting Brook Lopez. You shut up and take your Brook Lopez.
Give me DJ Wilson.
I'm not doing DJ Wilson. I can't get there. Brook Lopez just last year, because he wasn't in that previous postseason game. 26 minutes, 9 fantasy points. 24 minutes, 18. 29 minutes, 21. I was wrong. He did beat 20 once. 29 minutes, 19. And 18 minutes, 5 by the end. That's
like a Family Guy bit.
That's not good. That's a lot of. Well, I get excited whenever everything makes sense. Whenever the film and like my common sense and what I expect and the data all like say, hey, this should work this way for this guy. Similar to the whole Westbrook thing yesterday. It's very weird for me to be like I had James Harden as my third best Rocket yesterday. That's saying quite a bit. I'm a massive James Harden fan, so I needed to be significantly tilted to go with Westbrook there. But they were really making it a priority. It's just like I don't see if they do anything like this on this team. How if they spend that much defensive equity, of which they have very little on that team, stopping James Harden, how Russell Westbrook doesn't go apeshit insane. And honestly, I was a little depressed. He only got like 60 something, but he was.
I mean, look, this dedication to your craft is why you are one of the greatest doing this, and I appreciate it. I just have to laugh for myself because that's a lot of numbers. It's kind of boy I am. But let's go quick round of Daddy Likes, of course, presented by Super Draft, the future of DFS, where I guess you don't even need box scores at Super Draft. You just pick your guys and go over at Super Draft. Build your own dream team at superdraft.io or download Super Draft at the App Store. Use the promo code AWESEMO right now for $20 free in Super Cash with your $100 deposit. Let's go right now to superdraft.io or download Super Draft in the App Store. All right, we'll do regular Daddy Likes, but as always, after we did it one show, I want to ask you, the first guy is, who do you think is the high-owned guy today in DK's $15? I believe we're at the Thursday special, another uncreative name by DK, killing me inside.
It's just Knicks and Suns, right?
Yep, but there's one guy who's certainly chalk. Actually, a couple guys who are chalk, but one guy who's I'm not gonna say it.
On DraftKings. Oh, look at that. You stopped yourself from
I did.
From
I did.
hinting
It was hard,
me.
but I did.
You stopped yourself from hinting me. God damn it. I shouldn't have stopped you. It's just all right. So DK prices. I think a few guys are going to be in a really similar range in this matchup. Like, I think you're going to have lots of Elf, Randle, Booker, Ayton, Bridges are all going to be pretty significantly owned. We'll be a second tier with like Rubio and stuff. I will say, I'll say Devin Booker is the highest.
You're going to say the right guy. I felt like you're going to say Bridges, who was number one at 28%.
Yeah, I'd have less. Like, he's the highest owned guy in the game. And I like Mccall Bridges a lot as a player. I like Chris Dunn a lot as a player. But as a fantasy quantity, kind of PJ Tucker in that I would rather zig when they zag in that particular spot.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Let's go through the rest of them. DeAndre Ayton at 25%, Devin Booker 22%, Julius Randle 22%, and Elfrid Payton at actually no, did I fuck that up? Julius Randle at 21 flat. My bad. So those guys there: Booker 22, Ayton 25, and Julius at 21. Any of those jumping out to you, Daddy?
So sorry. So 20. Someone said yesterday, I don't know if you saw, the guy retweeted the picture of you and me where I had my mouth open, shocked, like. I was
half asleep.
You looked like you were entering a coma. Yeah. And very someone described it as I had just informed you that I was your dad. Biologically, I do think it's possible I have you by some number of years.
We do have a lot of people who would tune into the show who would think that we could be either a father-son duo or a brotherly duo. I saw somebody comment that earlier today, which I think is amusing.
Yeah, we could both use.
I feel like you'd be like my cool uncle who like wears a leather jacket and like gave me my first cigarette and beer, and I was like, this beer tastes gross, and I didn't drink for 5 more years.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Sure. So you had Ayton was second at 25. I think I would end up with a little less Ayton, but the ceiling is there. There's still some variance. But yeah, he's going to go crazy on someone one of these days. I did not like him much the other day because it was a brilliant slate with just a million very, very well-priced players. And I thought they were going to play him 26, which had been their clear plan the last 2 games. He came out and played 33 minutes, which was inevitable. Much like him starting next to Baines, that wasn't going to continue because it was as stupid. And assuming anyone on the team knew anything about basketball, someone would say like, look, this is fun and all, but we'll lose games because of it. And so they'd stop.
I was more in the camp of this is fun.
It's fun. I love guys playing out of position. Every time a pitcher, every time an outfielder is pitching, I'm like, this is great.
Aiden would have been a good like 1990s 4. He just isn't a 2019 4.
Oh, you're. I can't tell you how right that take is. Yes, he's absolutely. It's just he just can't play that position. Not really on either end of the court is the. Anyway, that was not going to last. Neither was him playing 26 minutes a night. But the 2 games previously, one he played 26 in a competitive game with everyone healthy and no foul trouble, and the other one. He got up to 30 because Baines got in foul trouble. He got 2 fouls in the first 3 minutes of the third quarter, and so he came out early, and they gave 4 extra minutes to Ayton. But even then, I was like, you need Ayton to either play more minutes than he's expected to and go absolutely ape shit, or this play doesn't make any sense. So I had him as like a CB in my rankings on that day. And he played extra minutes. He played 33 and had a good game, but still just wasn't enough on that slate. He had whatever 40 or something, which had his 8K, was never going to get there. So like him more today. Matchup is great. Real possibility, perhaps expectation of minutes into the low to mid 30s. You can get there. So I suspect I'd have a little less, but I feel much better about it today than I did on that slate. At that ownership, I said the next 2 were Booker, Randle.
Yep.
I really like both those plays, 9K and 8K. They were both 21, 22, whatever. That sounds about right. I'd have a little more Randle. I'd have about 20% Booker. I think I'd be closer to 25% Randle. Then where was Elf?
So Elf is in the next tier. Elf is at 16. Cameron Johnson's at 14.4, which seems like a lot of Cameron. Dario Saric at 10.3 and Ricky Rubio under 10%. New dad narrative, one of my favorite narratives, as long as you think the guy isn't losing sleep. I like Ricky Rubio at half the ownership of Booker, more than half the ownership, or less than half.
Yeah, I'd have them pretty similar at that point. FanDuel, I expect the Booker to Rubio ratio to be a little bit lower because of the really exceptional price on Rubio there. But yeah, nothing giant hands out to me there. What did we end up with for 2 guys I'd be interested in? You haven't said it would be Mitchell Robinson and Marcus Morris. And this I screwed up again. I'm always trying to do better as a host. I failed to say have some Marcus Morris against the Suns. Like he's shown several times this year, dude will bust out randoid 50, 60 fantasy point game. Like we have had some obscene games, and on a 5-game slate, because of the questionable thing and the positionality and some of the other options, he was going to be really low owned. So I have a feeling he's 4% owned. I'll throw on Marcus Morris, 5.
So
6?
Marcus Morris is a rounded up 5%, 4.7%. Mitchell Robinson is a rounded down 5%, 5.1. So
yeah,
I'm with you on Morris.
I mean, he's the minutes could be limited, whatever. But Bullock is actually not playing, and they're like, I'm not thrilled with Marcus Morris with some degree of uncertainty, and it's the Knicks, so I'm never super thrilled with anybody, but. It's like you're looking at a guy who very reasonably in this matchup could drop 50. We've seen it a couple times this year.
His last game against the Clippers, last time he played.
And he's 5% owned. So that's bad hosting on my part. I forgot to say that.
Hey, I said he's a pivot to Randle, and you like Randle more, though, which I think is the logical play. I just think Morris cuts off enough of Randle that he's got a shot today. So, yeah, I agree, under 5%.
Well, I like if I could restart my lineup and play either a Randle or Morris at this point, I would play Morris. Is the biggest compliment I can give, because I was a big fan of Randle today, but Randle was 22 or whatever you said, and Morris is 4. I like Randle more as a play at their prices, point per dollar, but not so much more that I want him at 5 times the ownership of Marcus Morris. I would make that change.
It is not Bobby's world because he is under 4% at 3.8% for Bobby Portis, Aaron Baines 3%, Kevin Knox under 1, Kadeem Allen 0.5, Reggie Bullock at 0.5%. Eddie, what do you think those people did?
They played themselves, I'm sure of it.
They didn't. They did. In fact, that's a lot of people who played Reggie Bullock. That's what happened there.
0.5 is a big number. I mean, 0.5%. There you go. That's 3% of your rate covered.
Yeah, so there you go. Good job by those people. Check out that UFC promo right now, guys. You have to use the promo code UFC246 right now at Awesemo.com/join. Get that 1 week of MMA's all Awesemo all access pass for all of our MMA content for just $1. It's not anything cheap, anything stingy. You're getting the best information you can for MMA for this one game, this one one fight, one whole show that we have Saturday night here, UFC 246, and the return of Conor McGregor. So if you're watching that with somebody, it's a good way to get some skin in the game. And of course, also, thanks to Superdraft. I mean, we gave the plug already, but we appreciate them. Go to superdraft.io or download Superdraft on the App Store and use that promo code also for $20 on your deposit of $100 or more. All right, Eddie, it's not you tomorrow, right? Is it EMAC? I don't know who's with me tomorrow.
It is not me. It is Friday night.
Right, so it's probably EMAC would be my guess, but who knows? Tune in tomorrow for a mystery guest. It could be anybody. We'll find out tomorrow. We appreciate you guys. Hit the like button. Eddie, anything you want to say before we call it quits?
No, again, thanks again for everything yesterday. Congrats to those guys. Big shout out for those people who chose to donate some money to charity. Very good form. So thanks to all you guys. It was a lot of fun for me. I'm very excited to be back at my job. So I will see you all Saturday.
Yeah, Eddie appreciates you guys showing him the screenshots. That's his way to live vicariously through you guys as he gives all this great information each show. And tune into Eddie on Saturday and Sunday. So watch him later. I'll be back tomorrow. Watch me then. Have a great night.